Chapter 2282. Mu Hongyu looked at Rong Xiu in surprise. Your Highness, do you mean, Senior Diwu was in the Mahayana realm of the void body back then? Now that you're only in the minor realization realm, you naturally have many limitations. If you can break through to the Mahayana realm, you can cross all space barriers. At that time, not only will you be able to see Senior Diwu, but it's also possible to take him away quietly. Rong Xiu explained calmly. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. Rong Xiu, how do you know all this? Mahayana realm, minor realization realm. She had never heard of it before. But looking at him, he seemed to know a lot about it. Rong Xiu smiled. When I sent Senior Diwu's aura back, he told me all this. Chu Luiyue blinked. Really? But I was in the Red Moon Desert for so long and he never mentioned it? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Are you sure you had time to listen to him? Chu Luiyue's lips twitched. No, at that time she spent all her time and energy on those Shen formations and prescriptions. She worked so hard, but she still received criticism and disdain from Big Bao several times. Lan Shao and Diwu Zhangzi couldn't even get a word in at that time, so how could they say all this? At first, the two of them tried to speak up for Chu Luiyue and let her relax a little, but Big Bao rebuked them with a few cold words. So in the end, the two of them ran away, leaving only the words "good luck" for her. Just thinking about it made her sad. Chu Luiyue rubbed between her eyebrows. That's true. Mu Hongyu looked conflicted. But, even the minor realization realm took me a lot of effort to break through. The Mahayana realm is simply out of reach. I'm afraid I won't be able to break through in such a short time. Previously, with Diwu Zhangzi's guidance, she could still improve faster, but now she was almost fumbling around on her own. Rong Xiu paused. Although the void physique is rare in the Divine Ruins world, I've heard that several Mahayana realm powerhouses have appeared in the illusory god palace. If he could obtain the incantations they left behind, he should be able to rapidly increase his cultivation. Mu Hongyu was dumbfounded. But where can we find such a thing? Chu Luiyue suddenly said, I know where it is. Treasure Pavilion. Mingshu raised his head in surprise. You want the Mahayana cultivation method? Chu Luiyue nodded. Does the Treasure Pavilion have this item? Mingshu immediately smiled. Of course we do. It's just that it's been a long time since a cultivator with the void physique appeared in the illusion god palace. That's why the second boss ordered us to put these things away. If you want it, I can help you find it. Chu Luiyue heaved a sigh of relief. Thank you, Lord Ming. Mingshu smiled. There's no need to thank me. However, Miss Xuanhuan, you don't seem to have the void physique. Did you ask for this lady? As he spoke, his eyes fell on Mu Hongyu, who was standing beside Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue didn't deny it and nodded with a smile. Yes. Mingshu said, please wait here for a while. I'll go up and get it for you. With that, he turned and went up to the second floor. On the huge first floor of the treasure pavilion, only Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu were left. Mu Hongyu's eyes widened, and she curiously scanned her surroundings. She was shocked. Liu, there's a lot of good stuff here. She only took a cursory glance and saw many treasures that were rarely seen in the outside world. Chu Luiyue smiled. This is the largest store in the Illusion God Palace. There are countless collections, so it's naturally unusual. Mu Hongyu nodded in understanding, but her eyes were still filled with shock. However, this store is really interesting. It has the same name as Yao Chen's store. What a coincidence. I was also quite surprised when I first came here. However, most of the names of these stores are very similar, so it's not strange to have the same name. That's true. Mu Hongyu rubbed her chin. Yao Chen's store is worlds apart from this one. By the way, Liu, I saw that Lord Ming's attitude towards you was really good. Didn't they say that even the divine envoys were afraid of the treasure pavilion? His status shouldn't be low, right? Yet he was so polite to Liu. It wasn't just polite, it was extremely eager. Those who didn't know would think that you were his master. Chu Luiyue smiled and knocked her forehead. Don't talk nonsense. It's not good for Lord Ming to hear. It's only because they chose me to help copy the Shen formation, so we're closer. Mu Hongyu stuck out her tongue. Then they have good taste, choosing you immediately. However, I wonder who the backer of this treasure pavilion is? In the Illusion God Palace, who has a more honorable identity than the divine envoys? A light suddenly flashed in Chu Luiyue's mind. To be able to make the divine envoys so afraid, wasn't it only the rumored emperor? Fengming Mountain. Dumpling stood at the top of the mountain. Her grape-like eyes were tightly shut, and her thick and long eyelashes were trembling slightly. A breeze blew over, rolling up the corners of her skirt. The golden bell on her head jingled. Under her feet, boundless and surging power was continuously pouring into her body. The aura around her was also rising. The totem between her eyebrows was faintly discernible. In front of her, the two-tian baby was also quietly growing. Unknowingly, another tender leaf had grown out, swaying with the wind. After an unknown period of time, Dumpling finally opened her eyes and let out a long breath. Her eyes were extremely bright, and in that instant, it was as if there were flames burning in them. After a while they finally calmed down. Then she stretched out her small hand, tidied up her skirt, and muttered softly. "It's all messed up." Just at this moment, a rustling sound suddenly came from afar. She inadvertently raised her eyes to take a look and was instantly shocked. A blurry figure quickly flashed past her eyes. That was... Chapter 2283. Dumpling suddenly widened her eyes. She quickly took 2 steps forward, wanting to take a closer look, but the shadow had already disappeared from her line of sight. There was nothing in the air, as if nothing had ever appeared. Dumpling rubbed her eyes. Did I see wrongly? Why did she feel like she had seen it just now? But that was impossible. She frowned deeply. No matter how she thought about it, she felt that something was wrong. Let's wait for Ayu to come over and ask. She nodded thoughtfully. Whoosh, the sound of energy surging came from the side. She turned her head to look. The two-tian baby that she had buried earlier was gently shaking a few tender leaves. Although it was very small, it could still easily mobilize the surrounding heaven and earth energy. Perhaps it was because of this thing she felt that the desolate and lonely aura of Fengming Mountain had lessened a lot. She walked over and gently touched it with her small hand. You have to grow up quickly. This place is so bare and looks so ugly. The two-tian baby shook gently. The clouds moved with the wind. Treasure Pavilion. After about 15 minutes, Mingshu came down from the 2nd floor, holding an ebony box in his hands. He came in front of the 2 of them and presented the ebony box with both hands. He smiled and said, Miss Xuanhuan, Miss Mu, I'm sorry. This thing has been here for many years. It took me some effort to find it, so I'm late. Please take a look. Chu Liyue's lips curved up. Lord Ming, you're too polite. We have a favor to ask of you. We should be the ones thanking you. As she spoke, she raised her chin at Hongyu. Hongyu, I don't know much about this thing. You should take a look. Mu Hongyu tried her best to suppress the excitement and curiosity in her heart as she took the ebony box. The box was not locked and could be opened directly. There was a book inside. Mu Hongyu took the book out and opened it. Her almond-shaped eyes instantly lit up. This is indeed a Mahayana cultivation technique. She looked at Chu Liyue and could no longer hide the smile on her face. Chu Liyue also laughed. The precious treasure pavilion was really amazing. They actually had... She looked at Zheng and asked, Lord Ming, may I know the price of this book? Before he could finish, Yu waved his hand with a smile. Miss Xuanhuan, Miss Mu, take this as a free gift from the treasure pavilion to the 2 of you. Chu Liyue and Mu Hongyu were both stunned. Free gift? Lord Ming, I'm afraid this isn't appropriate? Chu Liyue said hesitantly. One didn't need to think to know how precious this book was. The treasure pavilion actually gave it away just like that? No matter how generous he was, he shouldn't have come here like this, right? Mu Hongyu was also stunned. The shop is so lavish, he explained with a smile. The 2 of you may not know this, but the illusory god palace hasn't had an incorporeal body for more than 1,000 years. Even if we go back 10,000 years, there were only 3. However, those 3 people passed away before they could reach the initial realization realm. Miss Mu, if I'm not wrong, you just reached the initial realization realm, right? Mu Hongyu nodded. That's it. Miss Mu, you came from the Divine Ruins world and have already reached the initial realization realm at such a young age. Your future is almost limitless. It's only a matter of time before you reach the Mahayana realm. This thing is useless in our precious treasure pavilion. It's just going to be shelved and gather dust for no reason. However, if it's given to Miss Mu, it will be of great use. There was undisguised admiration in Ming Shu's eyes. Take this book as a gift from the treasure pavilion to you. Please don't stand on ceremony, Miss Mu. Mu Hongyu blinked. Was this because they were interested in her talent, so they were giving her this book as a sign of goodwill? But this was too precious. She instinctively looked at Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue pondered for a moment. The treasure pavilion's intention could not be more obvious, and it was reasonable. However, even if they thought highly of Mu Hongyu, it seemed a little overboard to give her a Mahayana realm cultivation art like this. As if seeing the 2's hesitation, Ming Shu stroked his beard and smiled. Actually, the 2 of you don't have to be so troubled. The incorporeal body was an extremely rare cultivation body. Its cultivation method was poles apart from that of ordinary cultivators. Even if this book fell into their hands, they would not be able to understand it. To most people, this was not a treasure but a meaningless book. Now that Miss Mu had this talent, they naturally could not waste it. In short, it was just a favor at no cost. Hearing him say this, Chu Liwei could not refuse. After all, this was the purpose of their visit. In that case, thank you, Lord Ming. Mu Hongyu immediately smiled. Thank you, Lord Ming. Ming Shu chuckled. It's a small matter, not worth mentioning. I hope Miss Mu can successfully break through to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible. Chu Liwei turned to look at Mu Hongyu. Hongyu, you go back first. There are still some Xian formations here that have not been copied. This could be considered a return gift to the treasure pavilion. Mu Hongyu responded and quickly left. Chu Liwei then went up to the second floor. She had already deciphered all the Grand Xian King Master's Xian formations on the star path, and now only the Great Grandmaster's part was left. Chu Liwei stayed in the room on the second floor for a long time. Not only did she copy all the Grand Xian King Master's Xian formations on the mythical flame diagram, she also tried to practice with a few Great Grandmaster's Xian formations. Although the difficulty had increased by a lot, everything was still going smoothly. It was just that it consumed a lot of time and energy. These were all small problems for the current Chu Liwei. After she was done, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes to rest. Everything that happened just now was still replaying in her mind. The corners of her lips curled up. Now she really wanted to meet the second master of the treasure pavilion, as well as the rumored first master. Mingshu's explanation just now did not sound wrong, but after thinking about it carefully, Chu Liwei realized that there was actually a huge logical problem. It was understandable that the treasure pavilion wanted to rope in a genius like Mu Hongyu, who had the intangible body. But the key was, they did not have to do so. Yes, the intangible body was very rare, but Mu Hongyu was still in the initial realization realm. It was still uncertain whether she could break through to the Mahayana realm. Even if she really did break through to the Mahayana realm, the treasure pavilion did not seem to need to curry favor with her. After all, even the divine envoys had to be polite to them. The treasure pavilion, who had a powerful backer, did not need to curry favor with anyone. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening came from outside. Chu Liwei stood up and walked outside. She was very fast. When she came out, she saw Mingshu walking out of a room at the end of the corridor. Through the half-open door, a figure was faintly discernible. Chu Liwei narrowed her eyes slightly. Chapter 2284. Why does this figure look so familiar? Mingshu looked up and saw that Chu Liwei had unknowingly walked out of the room. At this point, she was half leaning against the door frame with her arms crossed as she lazily looked over. His heart skipped a beat and he quickly turned to close the door. He then looked at Chu Liwei again and laughed. Miss Xianhuan, why did you come out so early? As he asked, Zhao was secretly shocked. Madame's strength seemed to have improved again. When she came out just now, he didn't notice at all. If he had known that he would bump into her when he came out, he would have been more careful. Chu Liwei smiled faintly and asked, Nothing. It's just that I'm almost done copying the Xian formation this time and was about to go back. But I didn't see Madame Zhao, so I came out to take a look. Her gaze fell on the closed door behind Zhao. The person inside, his second master? Mingshu couldn't deny it. Miss Xianhuan is indeed intelligent. At this time, there weren't many people who could go up to the second floor. Zhao looked rather respectful when he came out. That person's identity was naturally clear. Chu Liwei stepped forward and said, Since it's such a coincidence today then, Second Master, do you have time to meet me? Her voice rose slightly. Although she was looking at Zhao, she was obviously talking to the person inside. When Yengu heard this from inside the room, his heart thumped wildly. He anxiously looked around for a suitable place to hide. Should he just run away? How did she see him? Logically speaking, she shouldn't be able to see anything with just one glance. But Madame had always been sharp-eyed and was very familiar with him. If she really saw something, Yengu secretly regretted it. Why did she call Zhao over at this time? It wouldn't be too late to talk about many things after Madame left. Just as he was panicking, Mingshu's voice came from outside. Miss Xianhuan, our second master's health? Second master hasn't recovered yet? Yes, second master is not very well now. He probably can't see you. Chu Liwei smiled. Isn't this a coincidence? I've just broken through to become a senior doctor some time ago, so I'm just in time to take the second master's pulse. Zhenbao Pavilion has helped me so much, I've always felt very apologetic. If he could do something for the second master, it would be great. Mingshu paused and spoke hesitantly. Miss Xuanhuan, we appreciate your kindness, but second master has an old illness. I've already asked the medical sage to come over and take a look at him. There's no big problem, he just needs to rest well. You've just finished copying those profound formations, and I reckon that it's time for you to rest. How can I trouble you? Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Mingshu quietly. That pair of clear starry eyes carried a hint of scrutiny. Staying here alone would indeed be very uncomfortable for her. Yu also missed Dumpling very much, so she came over today. As she spoke, Chu Luiyue kissed her chubby little face. Dumpling, how do you feel being here by yourself? The aura on your body seems to have strengthened? Chu Luiyue's face revealed a look of surprise. How long had it been, and there was already such an obvious change? Dumpling pursed her lips. It's just like that. Yu is not here, so I'm not happy. She was bored, so she could only spend most of her time on cultivation and strive to open her meridians as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue sighed in her heart. Fengming Mountain is indeed extraordinary. Dumpling's cultivation on this day had almost exceeded the previous few days. More importantly, because Fengming Mountain was originally the territory of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestors, Dumpling's cultivation here was extremely efficient, and there wouldn't be any hidden dangers. This was much better than forcefully opening her meridians. If this continued, she should really be able to open her 7th meridian very quickly. Alright, Yu, I think I saw. Tuanzi suddenly thought of something. She hesitantly bit her finger and put it close to her ear. It seems to be, boom. Before Dumpling could finish her words, a loud sound suddenly came from the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened as she immediately looked up. Chapter 2285. Then a reddish gold flame suddenly soared into the sky. The aura of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix? Chu Luiyue murmured in shock. Dumpling also looked over. After being stunned for a moment, her small face suddenly frowned. That's the Great Elder. Chu Luiyue looked at her with some surprise. Elder Yigong? Dumpling, are you sure? Of course. Dumpling gritted her teeth. I definitely won't be wrong about this kind of thing. It's him. And he's still trying to open his meridians. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered slightly. Dumpling had the purest bloodline and was already the young master. She knew the aura of all the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clansmen like the back of her hand. Of course she wouldn't be wrong. And now, Yi Zhao was trapped in the Thunder Sea, and the rest of the clansmen were forcibly sealed in the Phoenix God Mountain by him. Only Yi Gong wasn't there. Other than him there wouldn't be any other answer. So he's in the illusory God Palace. Chu Luiyue had long suspected that there was something wrong with Yi Gong's disappearance. Now, it seemed that he was almost certain that he had betrayed the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Otherwise, how could he have the capital to stay in the illusory God Palace to open his meridians at this time? A powerful summoning force came. A reddish gold light flashed in front of Dumpling. It was the ancestor's golden feather that was summoned by this force and was about to go there. Swoosh. Dumpling quickly flew out and grabbed the ancestor's golden feather back. Don't go. He wanted to open the 7th meridian? She wouldn't let him. The corner of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. He never thought that Dumpling would have such a move. The ancestor's golden feather struggled in Dumpling's hand for a moment, then obediently stayed there. The purest bloodline summoning force was naturally stronger for the ancestor's golden feather. Tuanzi glared at her fiercely with a pair of big grape-like eyes. I want to see how he's going to open his meridians this time. At this moment, Yi Gong, who was at a certain area of the illusory God Palace, had finally noticed that something was off, and he suddenly opened his eyes. Something was wrong. Why hasn't Ancestor Jianghu appeared yet? Even though this was not the Divine Phoenix Mountain, he was still a Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and possessed a powerful bloodline. As long as he was preparing to open his meridians, no matter where he was, Ancestor Jianghu should have answered the summons. It seems that your talent is far inferior to hers. A gentle and deep voice came from behind. Yi Gong suddenly turned his head. The second divine envoy? Yu Qian raised his chin. Alright, there's something I haven't told you yet. Dumpling is already at Fengming Mountain. The reason why you couldn't summon Ancestor Goldfeather should be because of her. Yi Gong was startled. Soon after, an unwillingness surged into his heart. How much had he sacrificed to open his 7th meridian? He had waited so long for this day, but it was forcefully interrupted just like that? From the second divine envoy's words, he actually admired Dumpling. Second divine envoy, although she has the purest bloodline, She broke through all the way from the 9-colored heavenly pheasant and followed xuanhuan for several years. Her thoughts dash, none of this is important. Yu Qian interrupted him impatiently. She has the purest bloodline. That's enough. Something seemed to be surging in Yi Gong's chest. He felt extremely stifled. Yu Qian glanced at him. However, you don't have to care too much about this. As long as you can open your 7th meridian, what I said before still counts. Yi Gong took a deep breath. I know. It wasn't that he had no way. Because in this world, there wasn't only one ancestor golden feather. There was another one, and it was in this illusory god palace. He closed his eyes again and devoured the surrounding energy of heaven and earth in an even crazier manner. The crimson gold flames burned even more fiercely and completely surrounded him. A moment later, a buzzing sound came from somewhere in the illusory god palace. Immediately after, a crimson gold stream of light tore through the air. It was the ancestor golden feather that was used to register in the divine register. Sensing this aura approaching, Yi Gong made up his mind. This time he had to open his 7th meridian no matter what. Ancestor golden feather. Sensing the commotion here, Dumpling immediately realized what had happened. Ayu, this is their one. Chu Liwei frowned slightly. Looks like Yi Gong has made up his mind this time. Dumpling smiled coldly. He's dreaming. As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and quickly flew over. Dumpling. Chu Liwei was shocked and immediately went to pull her, but it was already too late. After Dumpling opened her 6th meridian, her strength had increased greatly. Now that she was anxious, she directly used her fastest speed. Chu Liwei followed without hesitation. Dumpling quickly arrived in front of the barrier that descended from the sky. This barrier separated Phoenix Cry Mountain from the illusory god palace. It would be extremely difficult to pass through. Yi Gong heard the commotion and looked over. He sneered with a mocking gaze. Although the two were far away, they could still sense each other's gaze and expression. Dumpling gritted her teeth. You traitor. You betrayed Grandpa Patriarch, didn't you? Yi Gong snorted coldly. He was the one who was stubborn and wanted to lead the entire clan to death. I was just making the right choice for him. Dumpling spat. Bah. Who do you think you are? Yi Gong's expression changed. No one would be in a good mood after being insulted in public like this. But soon his expression returned to normal. Deske. Chapter 2286. That ancestor's golden feather pierced through the air with the wind. Almost without stopping, it directly passed through the barrier in the middle and arrived in front of Dumpling in the blink of an eye. At this moment, 6 crimson gold lines had also been summoned from between her brows. The flowing light was like a burning flame. The ancestor's golden feather hung between her brows and slowly but firmly began to draw the 7th line. Dumpling. When Chu Liwei saw this scene, her heart immediately rose to her throat. Dumpling had just opened her 6th meridian not long ago. Now that she was forcefully opening her 7th meridian, it would undoubtedly have a great impact on her. It was very likely that her body would not be able to withstand the impact of this terrifying pressure and vast power. Previously, it was not easy to help Dumpling recuperate her body. Now, Chu Liu's temples throbbed. She felt as if all the blood in her body had solidified at this moment. She wanted to step forward to stop it, but the ancestor's golden feather had already begun to carve the 7th line. If she rashly interrupted it now, the situation would not be any better. However, at this moment, Yi Gong's mood was even worse. He could have successfully opened his meridians, but now it was all ruined. Bang! He furiously swung out a wave of power. The ground beneath his feet instantly cracked open. Crimson gold flames burned along the crack, leaving behind a charred mark. However, no matter how he vented his anger, he could no longer change the fact that had already happened. Dumpling had indeed easily snatched the ancestor's golden feather from him. This was not the first time such a thing had happened, but Yi Gong had never imagined that there would be a day when it would actually happen to him. He was the first elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. However, when Yu Qian, who was standing not far away, saw this scene, his eyes shone as he exclaimed in amazement. The purest bloodline indeed lives up to its reputation. Dumpling and Yi Gong had both opened their 6th meridian. However, not only was Dumpling able to firmly guard her original ancestor's golden feather, she was even able to directly snatch the 2nd one from Yi Gong. Such bloodline power was completely overwhelming. If Dumpling could use this opportunity to open her 7th meridian, it would be killing several birds with one stone. At that time, would there still be a need for Yi Palace? The ancestral golden feather pattern was extremely difficult to inscribe. Although Dumpling's bloodline power was unparalleled, the power she had accumulated in her body was not enough to support the opening of her 7th meridian channel. Therefore this process became incomparably slow and difficult. The surrounding heaven and earth energy began to crazily pour into her body. Chu Liyue's eyebrows twitched violently. She was really worried that the same thing that happened in the Red Moon Desert would happen again. But gradually she realized that the situation was a little strange. Dumpling continued to devour the energy, but from the beginning to the end she did not show any signs of pain. Her body was like a sponge, continuously absorbing this power, but there seemed to be no end to it. On the contrary, her aura became stronger and stronger, and her eyes became brighter and brighter. Her entire body was enveloped in pure golden flames, and the scorching heat almost set the air ablaze. Hula, the sound of surging tides could be heard. Chu Liyue turned around to look. She saw that on the top of Fengming Mountain not far away, there were clearly many Tutian babies swaying in the wind, sending boundless energy over. A resplendent pattern slowly appeared between Dumpling's eyebrows. Chu Liyue held her breath. Could it be, was it because this was Fengming Mountain? When she first came here she had already noticed that the power here was different from the outside world. Dumpling especially liked it. But at that time she did not pay too much attention to it. She only thought that it was because this was the place where the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix ancestor had stayed. As a junior, Dumpling would behave like this. But now it seemed. Forcefully opening her meridians is just courting death. Now that she is not yet an adult and is so rash, the final result will not be any better. Yi Gong clenched his fists and said hatefully. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a cold gaze land on him. He was shocked and turned his head to look, only to see Yu Qian looking at him coldly and mockingly. Yi Gong, although you have done a good job in reporting him, it does not mean that you can do whatever you want in the illusory god palace. You'd better know what you can say and what you can't say. Otherwise, I think Yi Zhao would be happy for you to accompany him. Yu Qian's voice was an undisguised warning. Yi Gong choked and wanted to defend himself, but in the end he gave up. He gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Finally he said, I will follow the second divine envoy's instructions. He lowered his eyes, hiding the resentment and killing intent in his eyes. So what if he didn't want him to say it? These were all facts. Just wait and see. If he forced it like this, he would only bring about his own destruction. Half of the line between Dumpling's eyebrows had finally been drawn. However, at this moment the ancestor's golden feather suddenly stopped and did not continue. The remaining half was like a heavenly moat that was difficult to cross. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Dumpling's face was flushed red. She clenched her fists and stared at the ancestor's golden feather in front of her. Continue. The 7th meridian was only half opened. However, no matter how she urged, the ancestor's golden feather could not continue. Because of the long pause, it even trembled faintly as if it would fly away at any time. Seeing this scene, Chu Liyue's heart sank. This was the sign of a failed meridian opening. Suddenly stopping in the middle of opening a meridian was the worst. Because once it stopped, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to continue opening meridian. Even if it could continue, how could she ensure that the 2 meridian openings were completely compatible? If it could not be done in one go, mistakes would be inevitable. Without a doubt this would be a fatal blow. Even if Dumpling had the purest bloodline, she could not avoid this problem. Dumpling seemed to have realized the seriousness of the matter and urged the power into her body even more crazily. However, at this moment her body had already reached its limit. She was unable to control such a terrifying force. The ancestor's golden feather began to tremble violently. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. The smile on Yu Qian's face had completely disappeared and his brows were tightly knitted. He had spent so much effort to keep Dumpling at Fengming Mountain. If he were to lose just like that, wouldn't all his efforts be for naught? Most importantly, if she was crippled, then where were they going to find another person with the purest bloodline? Seeing this, Yi Gong's lips curled into a cold smile. He had already said that this was absolutely impossible. Even if she could snatch the ancestor's golden feather away, so what? She would never be able to successfully open her meridian without any preparation. If the 7th meridian was really so easy to open, Yi Zhao wouldn't be the only one in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan who had done it for so many years. At this moment, the ancestor's golden feather flew away. Dumpling's body trembled and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Digression. I saw the comments saying that Dumpling's real name is Yi Tuan? Chapter 2287. Dumpling. Chu Liyue's heart sank. Just as she was about to move, a black figure was faster than her. She paused. Zichen. Zichen pulled Dumpling into his arms. Then, almost without hesitation, he cut open Dumpling's palm. A dark red line of blood flew out. A drop of warm blood landed on his handsome and cold face. His expression did not change. He quickly wiped away the blood with his thumb and put it between his lips to suck on it. Then he cut open his own palm and overlapped it with Dumpling's palm, holding it tightly. The majestic aura that almost overflowed from Dumpling's body flowed out along the blood and into Zichen's body. The blazing energy was like flowing fire, spreading through his muscles, bones and blood vessels, burning every inch of his body. The bone-piercing, scalding pain surged from all parts of his body. He frowned slightly but did not make the slightest sound of pain. The crazy energy was absorbed by Zichen, and Dumpling's body gradually recovered. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw a familiar face. She was stunned. Zichen? Continue to open your meridians. Zichen's voice was as cold as ever, but at this moment, it inexplicably calmed Dumpling down. I'll help you. Chu Liyue, who was standing at the side, saw Zichen's actions and finally realized what he was planning to do. She immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Zichen. Was he crazy? If Dumpling wanted to open her meridians, she had to absorb enough heaven and earth energy to temper her body. However, she had just opened her 6th meridian. Now she did not make any preparations. It was almost equivalent to using force. Of course, her body could not bear it. Even if the energy here was extremely beneficial to her cultivation, it was still very difficult. The reason why the ancestor's golden feather was cut off just now was because Dumpling could no longer accommodate any more heaven and earth energy. If it was full, it would overflow. Just relying on herself was definitely not enough. At this moment, Zichen stepped forward and channeled all the power that Dumpling could not bear into his body through the method of merging their bloodlines. This greatly reduced the pressure on Dumpling. At the same time, he could also reorganize this energy and slowly channel it back into Dumpling's body, repeatedly tempering her body. In this way, Dumpling would be able to utilize the power to its fullest extent without exceeding the limits of what it could withstand. The only drawback was that this process would be extremely difficult for Zichen. The Yu Qian had said before that even the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix clansmen might not be able to withstand the power here. Let alone Zichen. However, at this time, there was no one more suitable than Zichen. Because no matter what, half of the Great Phoenix Dragon's bloodline power still flowed in his body. And this was also the foundation of how he could help Dumpling. If it were any other divine beast, they would have already exploded and died. So, it had to be Zichen. Dumpling also immediately understood this point and suddenly widened her eyes. But, Zichen held her hand tightly. Compared to his broad and well-defined palm, Dumpling's fleshy little hand was especially small. When their palms touched, there was a faint smell of blood. Dumpling gritted her teeth and nodded seriously. Okay. Since they had already reached this step, they had to succeed no matter what. She closed her eyes and held her breath. The ancestor, Goldfeather, who had just flown away, had already reached the edge of the barrier. Sensing the movement on Dumpling's side, it swayed a few times and finally flew back again. More and more power poured into Dumpling's body. After tempering her body, it poured into Zichen's body again. After being refined by him again, it finally returned to Dumpling's side. This cycle repeated over and over again. Because of the intense pain, Zichen's body was trembling slightly. However, from the beginning to the end, he never stopped, allowing the boiling and majestic power to wrap around his body. Finally, the ancestor's golden feather arrived in front of Dumpling's glabella again. How is this possible? Everything that happened in front of him shocked Yi Gong. The corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows still had a cold and mocking smile. However, before his smile could fully spread, the situation suddenly reversed. His expression was particularly ugly. Yu Qian was also completely shocked. He originally thought that Dumpling might really not be able to make it this time, but who knew? Yi Gong took a deep breath. No problem, no problem. Even if Dumpling recalled the ancestor's golden feather again, it was impossible for her to follow the previous traces and continue to open meridians perfectly. Such a problem during meridian opening would undoubtedly affect her future cultivation. Even if she had the purest bloodline, she would definitely stop at the 7th meridian. Thinking of this, Yi Gong's mood finally improved. However, the next scene completely shocked him. Because that ancestor's golden feather had actually opened Dumpling's meridians from the beginning. An incomparably resplendent reddish-gold pattern slowly and firmly appeared between Dumpling's glabella, easily covering half of the previous pattern. At the same time, somewhere in the illusory god palace, a shadow flew over quickly and pounced into the thick layer of fallen leaves in the cold and silent courtyard. After a moment, a low and indifferent voice came out from within. "I told you long ago, now is not the time to go to Phoenix Cry Mountain." Under the piled-up fallen leaves, something surged for a moment, then quickly calmed down. A gentle breeze blew, and a few fallen leaves flew down. It was as if nothing had happened. In the depths of the lightning pool. Chapter 2288. The scarlet gold flames and the golden tianlei intertwined, creating a dazzling light that illuminated the depths of the lightning pool. The black chains were wrapped in blazing flames, and they began to tremble violently. Whoosh! The chains tightened as if they were about to strangle Yi Zhao to death. Mu Dongyu, who was meditating nearby, noticed the commotion. She immediately opened her eyes and looked towards the direction where the flames were shooting into the sky. The power around Yi Zhao had already begun to burn wildly, and the thick smell of blood permeated the air. Mu Dongyu's heart sank, and she immediately ran in that direction. This Yi Zhao is crazy. At the same time, the cultivators in the lightning pool also sensed that something was wrong. The flickering tianlei became inexplicably restless, and they began to wander around in a frenzy. Several cries of pain came from the lightning pool. Then, one figure after another quickly escaped and ran to the shore. The people standing on the shore were shocked by this scene, and they quickly retreated. The lightning pool is exploding. It was unknown who shouted loudly, but his voice was filled with panic. The people who escaped quickly looked battered and exhausted. Some of them couldn't dodge in time, and their bodies were covered in wounds. Blood dripped and their flesh was mangled. "Look!" A man standing on a reef suddenly pointed forward. Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction he was pointing, and they all gasped in unison. Within the vast and boundless lightning pool, countless silver heavenly lightning bolts seemed to have been summoned by something and were rapidly converging towards the center of the pool. Because there were too many of them, these tianlei collided fiercely with each other, and sparks flew everywhere. However, their speed was not affected in the slightest. It was precisely because of this that many cultivators couldn't help but be affected by the shockwaves and suffer injuries of varying degrees. How could this be? In the dead silence, someone couldn't help but mutter, his eyes full of shock. No one answered. This was a problem they had no answer to. Even though some of them had been in the illusory god palace for thousands of years, they had never seen such a scene. There are still people who haven't come out. Song Qing, who had finally escaped from the water, had just reached the shore. He looked back and said worriedly. From where they were, they could still see a few figures struggling in the lightning pool trying to make their way over. However, at this moment, all the tianlei cultivators were rushing towards the center. Their actions were no different from going against the flow and were extremely dangerous. One had to know that when the tianlei was in its normal state, its destructive power was already terrifying enough. Many people had to be careful when they entered the tianlei lake. If he was not careful, it was very likely that he would return with injuries. And now, with the tianlei riots, the level of danger had increased by several times. Not to mention coming out unscathed, even coming out alive was a problem. Help! Sure enough, a panicked cry for help soon came from the lightning pool. The people standing on the shore looked at each other. Song Qing took a step forward hesitantly. But in the end he looked at the injuries on his body and stopped. It wasn't easy for him to get out. If he went back he might not be able to get out himself, let alone save people. Soon a few waves surged over and quickly swallowed those figures. Only a few of them were still struggling. I beg you all, help. This time Song Qing heard it clearly. It was Qing Pei's voice. He frowned. Ever since Qing Pei found out that the Tianlei Lake could refine the divine body, it was as if he was addicted and came here frequently. Gradually he was no longer satisfied with staying at the edge of the Tianlei Lake. He started to try to go in bit by bit. Even if doing so caused him to be in a sorry state and covered in injuries, compared to the power he gained, it was not worth mentioning. Song Qing had previously advised him not to do so. Although refining the divine body in the Tianlei Lake could increase one's strength quickly, the effect was limited and there were also disadvantages. Using this method once or twice was no problem, but it was too much to do it too often. If one wanted to become stronger, it was best to cultivate diligently. But why would Qing Pei listen to him? He desperately wanted to become stronger, especially after hearing about Chu Liyue's matters recently. The fire in his heart burned brighter and brighter, and he couldn't wait to unleash all of his potential so that he could trample on her. That was why he ignored his safety and went into the depths of the Tianlai Lake. Who knew that he would run into such a shocking change? With such a scene, those who have not come out are probably dead. The fourth divine envoy is still in the depths of the Tianlai Lake. Will he help them? I'm afraid it's hard to say. The Tianlai Lake is rioting. With such a commotion, how could the fourth divine envoy have the time and energy to care about these things? That's true. And there seems to be someone over there? Is that Mitsui? It should be him, right? Hasn't he been coming here every day recently? And every time he goes in deeper than the others. But why do I feel that the Tianlai Lake is not a threat to him? He's coming here. Mitsui's name had been very famous in the Tianlai Lake recently. Not only because he came here often, but because every time he came, he would go into the depths of the Tianlai Lake and stay there for a long time. More importantly, he had never been injured even once. Everyone saw that every time he came out, he was stronger than before. Moreover, he did not seem to be in pain at all. He was always in high spirits. As time passed, people did not even have the heart to be jealous of him. Because sometimes you can't compare yourself to a pervert. And this time, when so many cultivators were trapped in the Tianlai Lake and were tortured, facing the danger of death, he was still as calm as ever. Mitsui was originally using his small hammer to hit a rock, but halfway through he realized that something was wrong. When he saw the Tianlai Lake around him rushing into the depths of the Tianlai Lake, his first reaction was to follow them. But when he remembered that he had been warned by the fourth divine envoy, he gave up on this idea and turned to leave. He strode through the Tianlai Lake. Countless silver Tianlai Lake surged past him, but they all tactfully avoided him. As a result, Shijing did not encounter any obstructions or threats as he smoothly made his way to the shore. Help! Help me! As he walked, he heard a cry for help. Mitsui turned his head to look. Oh, someone familiar. At this moment, Chengpei saw Mitsui clearly. His expression froze. However, it was only for a moment before he continued to shout. Mitsui, as long as you save me, I won't save you. Mitsui said crisply, then turned and left without any hesitation. What a joke how Chengpei treated their master before. He had forgotten, but Mitsui did not forget. Save him? The fact that he didn't step forward to step on them was already a sign of his benevolence. Chapter 2289. Chengpei felt as though he had fallen into an ice cave. Actually, if it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, he wouldn't have put aside his pride to ask Shijing for help. Wasn't there no other way? He had only been trapped here for a short while, but his body was already riddled with wounds from the terrifying Tianlai. There wasn't a single spot on his body that wasn't damaged. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before he would really be buried here. It wasn't that he didn't try to leave by himself, but he realized that it was impossible. With his current strength, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to go against the surging tide. However, Shijing was different. He didn't know why. Perhaps it was because of his special physique or some other reason, but in short he was clearly much more relaxed than the others in this lightning pool. Ignoring the previous events just now, everyone was in a sorry state because of this sudden change, but Shijing was still walking as though it was flat ground. Other than him, Chengpei didn't know who else he could ask for help. He clenched his teeth and shouted, Shijing. In any case we came to this illusory god palace together. Are you really not willing to help at all? Shijing snorted coldly. I came here on my own. Who came with you? Besides, aren't you very stubborn? Then go on your own. I heard that when you wanted to cross that sea, you asked my master to help you. After my master rejected you, you still hold a grudge in your heart and remember it until now? Chengpei, I say you're already so old. How can you be so shameless? Chengpei was speechless from the rebuke. His face was pale. After Shijing finished speaking, he continued walking toward the shore. People like you deserve to be taught a lesson. Just as Chengpei was about to say something, several bolts of heavenly lightning converged to form a tidal wave, surging towards this side at lightning speed. Shijing was in front of him and bore the brunt of it. However, just as Chengpei thought that Shijing was going to be swallowed, he saw Shijing raise the hammer in his hand and swing it casually. Whoosh, an invisible force surged out from within, and the surging silver heavenly lightning seemed to be affected by it as it quickly scattered in all directions. After passing Shijing, they quickly gathered together again and rushed over with the wind and waves. Its aura was even more ferocious than before. Shock flashed through Chengpei's eyes. How could this be? These heavenly thunders seemed to be under Shi's command and were under his control. As if sensing his gaze, Shijing suddenly turned around and glanced in his direction. The brows on his tanned and rough face twitched. Soon after, he revealed a smile. Qingpei suddenly realized something. You, whoosh? As soon as he opened his mouth, he didn't even have the time to say the rest of his words before the surging and terrifying wave had already surged over and swallowed him in an instant. Then, his figure was quickly annihilated by the countless dazzling heavenly thunders. Mitsui weighed the hammer in his hand. It was still useful. Fortunately, he didn't make much of a move just now. Other than Qingpei, no one else should have seen it. He rubbed his nose and turned to walk toward the shore. When they arrived at the edge of the lightning pool, the amount of Tianlei here had greatly decreased. It was very thin. I jumped up and returned to the shore effortlessly. The gazes of the surrounding people all gathered on him. As expected, after all the twists and turns, he was still unharmed. Many people looked at each other. Previously, they had thought that it was because of his strong physical body that he was able to withstand the Tianlei so easily. But now this explanation was clearly not enough. Out of so many people, some were dead, some were injured, but he was the only one who was able to walk out from the depths of the lightning pool unscathed. Did this not mean that there was a problem? However, I didn't care about the various gazes of the people around him. He tidied his slightly messy clothes, gripped the hammer in his hand tightly, and turned back to look at the lightning pool. The endless Tianlei was still surging toward the depths. Looking from afar, they could only see a bright light flashing between the dark sky and the earth. Shai frowned. Could it be that something had happened in the forbidden area deep within the lightning pool? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a loud roar suddenly sounded. Rumble. This voice came from the depths of the lightning pool, deep and heavy. Everyone felt as if something was crushing down on their hearts, making it difficult for them to breathe. Some of the weaker ones immediately spat out blood, their faces pale. Seeing this scene, everyone's heart sank. This time, I'm afraid that something serious is going to happen. Following this, a pure gold flame shot up from the lightning pool into the sky. Surrounded by the resplendent silver light, the reddish gold flame appeared incomparably dazzling. The moment it appeared, it lit up half the sky. At this moment, everything in the surroundings seemed to have dimmed. Even the silver Tianlei couldn't compete with it in terms of brightness. The next moment, the flame was like magma, crazily surging in all directions. The flame was molten, bright, and unstoppable. Large swathes of heavenly lightning were engulfed, and crimson golden flames spread out. Looking at this scene, it seemed like it was going to overturn the lightning pool. Everyone was shocked by this scene, their hearts trembling, and they fell into a dead silence. Waves of heat surged, even the air became hot. Song Qing, who was standing at the front, finally regained his senses and took a few steps back in horror. This is the aura of the crimson gold sky phoenix? Without a doubt, such a noble pure gold color, such a terrifying power, who else could it be other than the crimson gold sky phoenix? This sound also quickly woke up the surrounding people. Crimson gold sky phoenix? Isn't that the sinners of the illusory god palace? Why would it appear here? Since tens of thousands of years ago, when the ancestors of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan betrayed the illusory god palace, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix had never appeared here. Who knew that such a terrifying aura would suddenly surge out from the depths of the lightning pool? Could it be that below? Screech. While everyone was panicking, the cry of a phoenix could be heard all of a sudden, which echoed between the heavens and earth. This phoenix cry also pierced through the clouds and wind, arriving at the illusory god palace and Phoenix Cry Mountain. At this moment, the seventh line between Dumpling's eyebrows was nearing its end. Hearing this familiar voice, her heart instantly tightened. The ancestor's golden feathers trembled violently. Chu Liyue's heart sank and he looked in the direction of the sound. The sound came from the lightning pool. What was Yi Zhao doing? Before he could figure it out, a painful groan suddenly came from behind him. Chu Liyue turned back and saw that Yi Gong in the distance seemed to be bound by an invisible rope, and his body was uncontrollably rushing toward the lightning pool. Chapter 2290. His body was engulfed in golden flames and was burning fiercely. His entire body was like a ball of fire as he quickly rushed in that direction. Chu Liyue's eyes narrowed slightly, but a trace of doubt welled up in his heart. Yi Gong was the great elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. The power of his bloodline was extremely strong. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be in such pain from being burned by his own flames. But at this moment he seemed to have completely lost control of the power in his body. Could it be because of Yi Zhao? Almost at the same time, on the other side, The 7th line on Dumpling's forehead was finally completed. Boom. A majestic and terrifying aura suddenly erupted from her body. She abruptly opened her eyes, and her pupils were completely filled with a scarlet gold stream of fire. Even Chu Luiyue felt a tightness in his chest at this moment. That aura seemed to have surged over from ancient times and covered the sky and earth. Zichen was standing closest to them and was immediately hit by this terrifying power. His chest trembled and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Dumpling immediately retracted her aura. She grabbed Zichen's hand tightly and poured the power in her body into his. The pure and powerful energy warmed his muscles, bones, and blood. Zichen licked the blood from the corner of his mouth with the tip of his tongue and shook his head. "I'm fine." He looked steadily at Dumpling. Saving Yizhao was more important. There was no need for words. With just a look, they could quickly understand each other's meaning. Dumpling's small face was filled with a rare solemnity. She nodded slightly and then with a tap of her foot, she chased after Yi Gong. Chu Luiyue immediately called Zichen back. In order to help Dumpling open her meridians, he had suffered an extremely shocking power impact. He would probably need to rest for a period of time to recover. As for what happened next, swoosh. The sound of something breaking through the air swept over their heads. It was Yu Qian who couldn't hold back and followed after them. Chu Luiyue moved and followed closely behind. The huge commotion caused by the explosion of the thunder pool caused the entire illusory god palace to become restless. Countless cultivators were alarmed and rushed over. At this moment, the people standing on the shore of the lightning pool were hesitating whether or not they should flee. Seeing the scarlet gold flames surging towards them, those who were standing nearby were also greatly affected. Some people couldn't take it anymore and started to retreat. Shijing looked into the distance and gradually tightened his grip on the hammer in his hand. It was as if something was surging in his chest, ready to burst out at any moment. At this time, Mu Dongyu had already arrived at the forbidden area. However, it was already too late. There was a hole at the top of the ball of light formed by the interweaving golden lightning. The raging golden flames were rushing out from this hole. Yi Zhao, who was trapped within, was now completely surrounded by flames. The terrifyingly high temperature made it impossible for Mu Dongyu to approach. "Yi Zhao, you're crazy." Mu Dongyu's voice was stern. Yi Zhao had chosen to immolate himself. Only in this way could the flames break through the shackles of the golden Tianlei. Every strand of power in his body, every inch of his muscles, bones, and flesh, would turn into flames that would devour the heavens and earth. Yi Zhao lowered his head as if he didn't hear his voice, or perhaps he did and didn't care. He allowed the flames around him to burn crazily, as if they wanted to burn everything to nothing. Mu Dongyu was burning with anxiety. He wanted to stop Yi Zhao, but it was clearly impossible for him to do so with his own strength. However, Yi Zhao couldn't die. At the very least, he had to live. Mu Dongyu raised his hand and waved, wanting to gather the surrounding Tianlei again and isolate Yi Zhao's flames. But soon he found that he had lost control of the Tianlei. How can this be? Mu Dongyu was shocked. He saw that not only the golden Tianlei, but even the silver Tianlei that was surging from all directions had gone out of control and were crazily strangling him, and then sending all this power to Yi Zhao. The ancient mythical beast could devour the Tianlei and turn it into divine power. As the 4th oracle, Mu Dongyu stayed in the lightning pool all year round and had absolute control over all the Tianlei here. He had never encountered a situation like this before. Mu Dongyu's heart beat rapidly. He knew very well that if this continued, the situation would completely go out of control in no time. At that time, Yi Zhao would either die or escape from here. Thinking of this, he turned around and left without hesitation, intending to find the other oracles and suppress him together. However, as soon as he moved, the surrounding Tianlei surged over one after another, making it difficult for him to move as if he was trapped in a swamp. Mu Dongyu sucked in a breath of cold air. This lightning pool was really like seeing a ghost. Just as Mu Dongyu was entangled with the Tianlei, a ball of fire suddenly fell and quickly converged on him. He subconsciously looked up, and his pupils constricted. Yi Gong? Wasn't he in the palace of the illusory god? How could... Suddenly he thought of something and he swiftly turned around to look at Yi Zhao. As the clan leader, if he sacrificed himself, he could naturally summon his clansmen. Although Yi Gong had betrayed the phoenix godly mountain, he was still a crimson gold sky phoenix. Every drop of blood flowing in his body was still filled with deep reverence for the highest existence of the crimson gold sky phoenix clan. If Yi Zhao wanted him dead, he definitely couldn't live. Trapped by the flames, Yi Gong fell into the ball of light surrounded by the golden Tianlei and arrived in front of Yi Zhao. Mu Dongyu clenched his fists. However, at this moment, another small figure rushed over quickly and rushed in without hesitation. He was shocked. It was the aura of someone who had opened the seventh meridian. At this moment, the golden flames suddenly rose. Chapter 2291. Her line of sight was completely blocked. The reddish-gold flames burned wildly, almost filling up the light sphere that surrounded the entire golden Tianlei, leaving no gaps. As for the three figures inside, they were also swallowed up, and not a trace of them could be seen. Mu Dongyu was about to step forward, but the surrounding Tianlei seemed to be affected by the power of the flames and became even more violent. Streaks of silver light flowed past him in all directions, intertwining and colliding with each other. It was chaotic, making it difficult for him to move. Mu Dongyu frowned. Yi Zhao was the clan leader, and he had already opened his seventh meridian. If he really made a decision, he could not be underestimated. He swung his arm and suddenly threw the spear in his hand. Swoosh! That long spear carried an extremely sharp attack power and instantly broke through the waves. Some of the heavenly thunders that were closer to him were forcefully dispersed and even exploded. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind Yu Qian, heading straight for the lightning pool. Before she arrived, she saw a reddish-gold flame from afar. It was burning into the sky and flowing continuously into the surroundings. At a glance, it looked like boiling magma spewing out from the bottom of the sea, covering and swallowing everything. A trace of shock flashed past her eyes, and she subconsciously held her breath. Even though she had already predicted what would happen here before she came, the scene before her eyes was still far beyond her imagination. This terrifying power, all came from Yi Zhao? Was he planning to go all out? Yu Qian was even faster than her. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the edge of the lightning pool. When he saw everything in front of him, his face completely darkened, and he clenched his fists tightly in his sleeves. Yi Zhao was courting death. But now was not the time for him to die. Besides, Dumpling was still down there. She had just opened her seventh meridian. If Yi Zhao went crazy and did something, the second divine envoy is here. A sharp-eyed person below saw Yu Qian and immediately exclaimed. As soon as he finished speaking, many people raised their heads and looked over with different expressions. The second divine envoy Yu Qian had absolute authority in the illusory god palace. Especially in the past few years, the first messenger had been in seclusion and had given Yu Qian full authority over many things. Naturally, Yu Qian's power and influence was even greater. However, unlike the other divine envoys, he spent most of his time in the illusory shrine and rarely came out. It was extremely difficult for everyone to see him. Now that the lightning pool was rioting, the commotion was shocking. Naturally, he needed to come out and take charge of the situation. Hearing the exclamations of the people around him, Mitsui also looked up, but then his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue, who was not far behind Yu Qian. Master. He waved at Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue moved and arrived in front of Mitsui. Sai, how are you? Chu Luiyue asked with a frown. She knew that Sai had been coming here often recently. She was worried that the lightning pool's riot would affect him. I grinned. Master, don't worry. I'm fine. These words attracted the attention of the surrounding people, and their mouths twitched. This master and servant pair was too interesting. They were clearly fierce people who had been to the depths of the lightning pool, but now they were asking how he was. What could a person like Shii do? Even if everyone here died in the lightning pool, there wouldn't even be a scar on his body. Seeing that Ai was full of energy and vigor, Chu Luiyue was slightly relieved. What's going on over there? As she spoke, she raised her chin. You're talking about the ball of fire that suddenly appeared in the lightning pool? Ai immediately gave a simple explanation of the situation, and also told her that Cheng Pei had died in the lightning pool. Chu Luiyue did not even bat an eyelid. He was just reaping what he had sown. She had never taken such a person to heart. What she cared about the most now was Yi Zhao and Dumpling. The fourth divine envoy has not come out? No. I thought for a moment and said. When the incident happened, the fourth divine envoy should have gone over immediately. At that time, although he was still quite a distance away, he could vaguely sense a familiar energy fluctuation. If he guessed correctly, it was the fourth divine envoy Mu Dongyu. Chu Luiyue nodded. Mu Dongyu had been in charge of watching over the lightning pool, so it was expected that she would do this. But, it's been a while since the incident happened. Why doesn't it have any intention of stopping? Chu Luiyue couldn't help but mutter softly. I laughed. How can you block it with that little bit of heavenly lightning? Chu Luiyue frowned and glanced at him. Why did Shi's tone sound like he was very familiar with the situation in the lightning pool? She hesitated for a moment and said slowly, "After all, that is the fourth divine envoy. The Tianlei here is under his control." I scratched his head and lowered his voice. "Master, I'm afraid that might not be the case." Chu Luiyue looked straight into his eyes. Oh. Previously, when Sai brought Tianlei back, she felt that something was wrong. However, at that time, her mind was on Changwanzhou, so she didn't think too much about it. She just thought that it was because of Shi's special constitution. His hammer was originally a lightning hammer, which could devour the power of Tianlei. But now, things seemed to be different from what she expected. I didn't notice the subtle change in her expression and continued. "That's right." Under the lightning pool. Before he could finish speaking, Yu Qin's body moved and rushed directly into the lightning pool. His speed was extremely fast, and before anyone could see his movements clearly, he had already disappeared. In an instant, countless Tianlei surged over with the reddish gold flames. Chu Luiyue made up her mind and rushed over with the tip of her foot. "Master," I wanted to stop him, but unfortunately he didn't make it in time. Just as he was about to rush forward, he saw the surging lightning pool. He frowned and stopped in his tracks. Almost subconsciously, he tightened his grip on the hammer in his hand again. Plop. Chu Luiyue dived into the lightning pool and directly dived into the depths. Here, she could already see a ball of reddish gold flames burning below, mixed with golden Tianlei. Clusters of flames were spreading rapidly with that place as the center. Yizhao, Dumpling, and Yigong were all in it at this moment. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips tightly. If she wanted to save Yizhao, now was the only chance. A sharp aura suddenly appeared. She focused her eyes and saw that it was a long spear. It was Mu Dongyu's item. Chu Luiyue turned around and easily dodged it. Then the long spear finally rushed out of the lightning pool. Buzz, the buzzing sound spread far and wide. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes slightly. This was the fourth oracle warning the other oracles. With a twist of her waist, she nimbly and swiftly rushed towards the ball of flame. At this moment, in the cage formed by the golden Tianlei, Yigong was looking at Yizhao in front of him in horror. Yizhao looked at him coldly. "Yigong, do you admit to the crime of betraying the clan?" Chapter 2292. Every word was like a boulder that smashed heavily into Yigong's heart. He held his breath, and all the blood in his body seemed to have stopped flowing at this moment. The surrounding flames burned, and the temperature was clearly extremely hot, but he broke out in a cold sweat. It wasn't guilt but fear. The current Yizhao could really kill him directly. Clan leader, I'm doing this for the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan." Yigong spoke with difficulty to defend himself. "If I don't do this, then our entire clan will die. Clan leader, do you really have the heart to do this? You admit it." Yizhao's voice was terrifyingly cold and calm. "As the great elder, you should know best what kind of punishment is for betraying the clan. Do you want to do it yourself or do you want me to help you?" Yigong's heart suddenly jumped as he listened. He knew Yizhao too well. Once he decided on something, he would never change it. Now Yizhao had already made up his mind to kill him, then, no matter how he begged for mercy, it was useless. When he figured this out, Yigong's expression suddenly became fierce. "I won't choose either." His voice was sharp and hoarse, and there was even a bit of hysteria in it. "Yizhao, I've already advised you to choose to submit to the illusory god palace. But how did you choose? It's your stubbornness that caused the entire clan to fall into this situation. Since you're not my master, how can you say that I'll submit? Anyway, you're the master of the illusory god palace, so what's the difference? Our ancestor made the wrong choice back then, and since then, our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan has become a sinful clan of the illusory god palace. Now that you have the chance to change everything, why don't you agree?" Yigong really couldn't figure it out. He clenched his fists, and because of his agitation, his face was abnormally red, and his eyes were filled with madness. Yizhao's expression didn't change, and he only said word by word, "What our ancestor chose is the choice of our clan for 10,000 years. Whether we live or die, it will never be changed. Yigong, you colluded with foreign enemies and betrayed your own clansmen. You deserve death. I was the one who promoted you to the position of Grand Elder. I was blind to have made such a big mistake. Today I will personally kill you. In the future, I will be able to answer to the ancestors and the clansmen." As he spoke, he raised his hand. The long period of inhumane torture had already caused him to be covered in cuts and bruises. Even his fingers were stained with blood and bruises. However, no one knew just how terrifying the power within his body was at this moment. A cluster of sparks appeared at his fingertips. Yi Gong's pupils constricted as a deep sense of fear surged into his heart. Without even thinking, he turned around and ran. However, just as he turned around and before he could take a step, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him and blocked his path. "Great Elder, where are you going?" A crisp and tender voice sounded. Dumpling was quietly floating in the air, tilting her head to look at him. Yi Gong's heart almost jumped out. "You." Just now, he was so focused on dealing with Yi Zhao that he almost forgot that the King of Hell was behind him. Tuanzi raised her eyes slightly and looked at Yi Zhao with a sweet smile on her lips. "Grandpa Clan Leader, can you hand the Great Elder to me first?" Yi Zhao paused and then nodded slightly. However, the sparks at his fingertips did not extinguish. Clearly, as long as Yi Gong made a move, he would still attack immediately. Yi Gong looked at Dumpling and felt that the smile on her face was incomparably dangerous. His entire body stiffened. What do you want to do?" He did not forget that Dumpling had just opened her 7th meridian. Even though she was still young in terms of strength, she could already completely crush him. Dumpling's expression was relaxed. "You will know what I want to do soon." With that, she raised her hand. Her chubby little hand was tightly gripping an ancestor's golden feather. A trace of confusion flashed through Yi Gong's eyes. However, in the next moment he saw Dumpling bite her finger. A dark red bead of blood quickly gushed out. Then she flicked her finger, and the bead of blood quickly flew towards Yi Gong's glabella. He instinctively wanted to dodge. However, at this moment he was surrounded by 2 people and could not move at all. Poof! A scalding pain shot through his body. That bead of blood actually entered Yi Gong's glabella just like that. Realizing what had happened, Yi Gong's body stiffened, and then his eyes suddenly widened. "You?" Dumpling's heart stirred. "Explode." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Gong felt an indescribable majestic force instantly sweep through his entire body. Then all the power in his body seemed to be summoned and started to surge rapidly. This movement was extremely similar to when he was about to open his meridians. Could it be? An extremely absurd guess suddenly surged into his mind. As if sensing his thoughts, Dumpling's lips curled into a brilliant smile. "Great Elder, don't you want to open your 7th meridian? I'll help you." She had a pure bloodline and had just opened her 7th meridian, so the bloodline power in her body was extremely abundant. With just a single bead of blood, she could instantly detonate all the bloodline power in Yi Gong's body and forcefully open his meridians. As expected. A look of shock flashed through Yi Gong's eyes. Dumpling actually wanted to help him open his meridians? What was she trying to do? Just as he was filled with panic, Dumpling's figure moved. Her pure gold lotus leaf dress swayed gently and golden bells jingled. Chapter 2293. Yi Gong had fantasized about opening his 7th meridian many times, but he had never imagined that it would be like this. Dumpling held the ancestor's golden feather in her hand and used a strand of her pure bloodline power to forcibly open his meridians. Every part of his body felt like it was being torn apart bit by bit, and intense pain came. Yi Gong's face was pale, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He wanted to break free in a panic, but how could he do that now? His mind was almost blank, and only the burning red gold flames in front of him were scalding and terrifying. As the Grand Elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, he had never thought that this flame would cause him such pain one day. He wanted to call for help, but he found that his throat was tightly choked by an invisible force, and he could only bear it silently. Dumpling's eyes were shining, and the ancestor's golden feather in her hand moved slowly and firmly. A fierce and terrifying energy wave came. The heavenly lightning surged wildly and entered the dazzling flame one after another. Mu Dongyu frowned. This situation seemed a little wrong. He was about to get closer for a closer look, but the golden Tianlei suddenly surged up and wrapped around the inside tightly, making it impossible to see anything. "Dongyu." A familiar voice came from behind, and Mu Dongyu immediately turned around. "Second Divine Envoy." Yu Qian waved his hand, and the surrounding Tianlei seemed to be afraid and retreated. He was stronger than Mu Dongyu, so it was naturally easier for him to move here. "What's going on?" Yu Qian asked as he stared at the huge ball of light not far in front of him. At this moment, countless golden Tianlei were wrapped around the red gold flames, and nothing could be seen in the dazzling light. Mu Dongyu quickly told him about what had happened. "So, all 3 of them are inside now?" Yu Qian frowned. Mu Dongyu nodded with a worried expression. "Yi Zhao is the clan leader after all, and he was so determined to immolate himself. He has a strong summoning power, so it's normal for Yi Gong and Mu Dongyu to come here. However, his actions were too sudden and extremely dangerous. If he was the slightest bit careless, the remaining two would be greatly affected as well. Therefore, the most important thing now was to stop Yi Zhao. But at this moment he had already gone mad. The flames had already burned half of the lightning pool. How difficult was it to make him stop? Yu Qian's expression was grave. Why did Yi Zhao suddenly become like this? Even Yi Zhao, who had been locked up here for so long and had suffered all kinds of torture, was not like this. I don't know what's going on today, but Mu Dongyu shook her head. I don't know either. It's like I was suddenly stimulated by something. Yu Qian frowned. Could it be because he sensed that Dumpling had opened her seventh meridian? This was probably the only explanation. Yi Gong's life and death did not matter. Even if Yi Zhao himself died, it did not matter too much. The key was Dumpling. She had just opened her seventh meridian. Yu Qian had witnessed this process with his own eyes. He knew too well how terrifying Dumpling's bloodline power was. So now he had to protect Dumpling no matter what. He pondered for a moment and said coldly, "Seal the lightning pool immediately and chase all the silver Tianlei out of this place. Only the golden Tianlei will remain." Yi Zhao had chosen to self-immolate. In the process he would need to devour a terrifying amount of Tianlei. Only by cutting off his supply of power could they hope to stop him. However, after saying that, Mu Dongyu did not immediately take action. Instead, she revealed a somewhat troubled expression. "Second Divine Envoy, this?" Yu Qian's expression turned cold. "Is there a problem?" Of course there was. Mu Dongyu took a deep breath and braced herself to say, "Second Divine Envoy, these Tianlei are no longer under my control." Yu Qian's eyebrows twitched violently. "What did you say?" A chill instantly surged and enveloped Mu Dongyu. Mu Dongyu's voice was hoarse. Just now." At first it was only a small portion, but as time passed, the flames on Yi Zhao's side burned brighter and brighter, and more Tianlei became manic and crazy. At this point he was almost completely out of control. If he still had a way, he would not be surrounded by these Tianlei and unable to approach for a long time. "This lightning pool has been under your care for 10,000 years. Every Tianlei should be under your control. Now you're telling me that you can't control it?" Yu Qian suddenly raised his voice, cold and stern. He had always been gentle and elegant to outsiders. Even if he was angry, he would usually have a smile on his face, which was unfathomable. At this moment he had exploded. Obviously he was extremely angry. Mu Dongyu's body tensed up. Her lips trembled slightly. She wanted to say something, but she realized that it was useless. Because that was the truth. After a long time he finally spoke. "Dongyu is useless." He himself did not know what was going on. It had always been fine, but now, Yu Qian clenched his fists. For tens of thousands of years, such a situation had never occurred in the lightning pool. What was going on now? Looking at Mu Dongyu's appearance, he was really angry, but now was not the time to punish Mu Dongyu. He closed his eyes, held his breath, and then raised his hands. Several streams of light flew out and quickly formed a seal in front of him. A majestic and terrifying aura faintly spread out from it. Then he slowly pushed his hands forward. The seal instantly flew out and grew in the wind. Wherever it passed, the silver lightning bolts that were scattered all over the place seemed to be attracted and suppressed by some kind of power, and they all came over here one after another. When Chu Luiyue arrived, he saw such a scene. Under the crazily burning ball of fire, there was a huge red seal floating quietly. Bolts of heavenly lightning continued to fly in that direction before they were forcefully suppressed below. Like a huge net, it gathered the surrounding Tianlei. This was the Yu Qian's work. As expected of a peerless expert above the god level. With just such a move he easily trapped these Tianlei. His gaze turned slightly and fell on the ball of fire. The flames were blazing and the flowing light was melting. Nothing could be seen from the outside. However, Chu Luiyue and Dumpling had a contract, so he naturally knew what was happening inside. This was an excellent opportunity. As long as Dumpling could force Yi Gong to open his meridians, the aura of these three people would become extremely similar. At that time, it would be much more convenient to do whatever he wanted. The key was that whether it was Yi Gong opening his meridians or letting the flames continue to burn and stir up the lightning pool, they all needed an endless supply of Tianlei. But now the Yu Qian had begun to block it. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips and then quickly rushed towards the burning ball of light. Dumpling. Chapter 2294. This clear and urgent voice instantly attracted the attention of Yu Qian and Mu Dongyu. The two of them turned their heads to look and saw a petite figure heading straight for the ball of light. Xuanhuan? Mu Dongyu was shocked. Why is she here? Because she had lost control of a large part of the Tianlei here, and because she had been scolded by Yu Qian just now, Mu Dongyu was so tense that she didn't realize that Chu Luiyue had arrived. The thunder pool was treacherous and dangerous now, and she actually came here just like that. Did she have a death wish? Yu Qian's eyes were cold. Naive. Needless to say, she must have come here to save Tuanzi. But she didn't think that with her strength she would be courting death here. Mu Dongyu was about to stop her. However, Chu Luiyue was faster. In the blink of an eye, she arrived in front of the ball of light. The scorching temperature almost distorted the space. Chu Luiyue summoned her divine body without hesitation. A beautiful and thin soft armor covered his body, instantly isolating him from the high temperature. She could almost ignore the terrifying burning sensation, but Mu Dongyu couldn't. Soon he had to stop. Second oracle? He looked at Yu Qian hesitantly. Ignore her. Yu Qian didn't stop moving, still gathering the surrounding Tianlei. It was normal for Chu Luiyue to want to save Dumpling. Besides, her divine body was indeed powerful. However, it was still impossible for her to enter. The golden Tianlei interweaved into a net with an extremely strong isolation pressure. Coupled with the burning golden flames inside, it was even more terrifying. Chu Luiyue was just doing some useless work outside. Looking at Yu Qian's expression, Mu Dongyu quickly understood what he meant. Thinking about it carefully, it did make sense. In such a dangerous situation, not to mention him, even Yu Qian didn't choose to advance rashly. What could one Chu Luiyue do? Without anyone stopping her, Chu Luiyue quickly arrived in front of the ball of fire. Even if she summoned her divine body, the terrifying pressure surging out of it still made her feel suffocated and short of breath. Even the surging speed of the force around her had slowed down. She held her breath and looked forward. The golden Tianlei that was swimming around was already wrapped in a layer of golden flames, burning brightly. It wasn't hard to imagine how terrifying the scene inside was. Sensing her arrival, a few bolts of lightning that were relatively close to her suddenly surged towards her joyfully. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched and she said in a very low voice, "Go back." The surrounding booms continued, and her words were easily drowned out. However, these Tianleizes were very obedient, and they left reluctantly. Chu Luiyue heaved a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, these Tianlei were very obedient. This was much more convenient. Thinking of this, force surged in her palm. A cold light flashed and a long sword appeared in her hand. This sword looked very strange. Half of it was bright and the other half was dark. The two extreme colors were distinct, but they fit perfectly. It was the sword that she had personally refined before. Bus. With a thought, the sword hummed. Then she grabbed the hilt with both hands without hesitation, raised it high and slashed down. The moment the sword fell, space was quickly cut open. Then, the sharp sword chi charged forward and landed on the giant net formed by the golden Tianlei. Boom. The two forces collided fiercely and a loud bang was heard. Violent energy spread out in all directions. Mu Dongyu heard the commotion and looked over subconsciously. What he saw caused his heart to tremble violently. When Chu Luiyue's sword fell, it stirred up an extremely terrifying energy vortex. Then, it directly lifted the barrier formed by the golden Tianlei. Above the dazzling ball of light, there were ripples like water ripples. Several golden Tianlei instantly lost control and began to move wildly. One had to know that this was the core of the entire lightning pool. Once there was a riot here, it would definitely spread far and wide. Sure enough, not long after, the surrounding silver Tianlei, which had originally been moving toward the Yu Qian, were affected and changed their direction, once again moving toward the ball of fire in the middle. Even those who had been suppressed by him began to stir once again. Yu Qian's heart sank. He quickly looked up and realized what had happened. Chu Luiyue was only a god-level expert. How could she move the golden Tianlei? This thought flashed through Yu Qian's mind, but it disappeared in an instant. There was no time to think about this now. Dongyu, stop her. At this point, Yu Qian finally realized that he had completely underestimated Chu Luiyue. However, it was already too late to give the order. Mu Dongyu was about to approach when she was swept away by a surge of energy. Tianlei was out of control. He no longer had any advantage here. There was nothing he could do. Seeing this, Yu Qian finally realized that the situation was worse than he had expected. He placed his hand on his lips. A shrill whistle could be heard coming from the depths of the lightning pool. Upon hearing this voice, Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. It seemed like the Yu Qian was serious. They had to end this quickly. She gripped the sword in her hand tightly, her expression anxious and worried. Dumpling, don't be afraid. I'll save you. As he spoke, he swung his sword again. Boom. The golden Tianlei began to move at an even faster speed. The energy vortex drew in even more Tianlei, which eventually sank into the wildly burning red-gold flames. At this moment, Yi Gong's body had reached its limit because he had endured too much power. Countless bloody wounds had exploded on his body. He was dripping with blood and looked extremely terrifying. However, the aura on his body continued to rise. Dumpling held the ancestor's golden feather in her hand. Her small hand was already trembling slightly, but she did not stop moving. She had to open this vein. Grand Elder, Ayu has already helped you so much. You can't not appreciate it. Her lips curled into a mischievous smile. Her voice was extremely soft. Yi Gong's consciousness had already fallen into a semi-unconscious state. Although he could hear what she was saying, he no longer had the strength to respond. Dumpling did not mind. She firmly and persistently engraved the last bit. Finally, the 7th mark had completely appeared between Yi Gong's brows. Buzz. A majestic aura surged out of Yi Gong's body. Immediately after, his body began to automatically devour the surrounding energy to repair itself. This caused Yi Gong to wake up slightly. He opened his eyes with great difficulty. As long as he could survive this, there was still hope for him to escape. Suddenly, his gaze focused. A trace of shock flashed across his eyes. After Dumpling forced him to open his meridians, she did not stop. Instead, she waved her hand and gathered the surrounding flames. Chapter 2295. That cluster of flames burned quietly on the ancestor's golden feather, its color even brighter than the surrounding flames. Yi Gong faintly sensed a familiar aura from it. This was clearly a flame formed by Yi Zhao sacrificing his own flesh and blood. What was she trying to do? As if she'd noticed Yi Gong's bewilderment, a wisp of an extremely brilliant smile arose on Tuanzi's snow-white and cute little face, and she said in a clear voice, "Don't worry, Grand Elder. I'm just giving you a small gift." Her smile was sweet, cute, and innocent. But at this moment in Yi Gong's eyes, he felt that her smile was incomparably terrifying. A strong sense of unease surged from the bottom of his heart. He wanted to say something but he couldn't make a sound. He could only watch as Dumpling played with the ancestor's golden feather, and then casually waved it lightly. That flame quickly flew over and actually burrowed into his body through the wounds on his body. A searing pain spread throughout his body. Yi Gong suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Every time he thought that he had reached the limit of pain and was about to become numb, there would always be an even more terrifying method waiting for him, stimulating his sense of pain over and over again. He wanted to just faint so that he could suffer less pain. But he had just opened his 7th meridian, and this was the time when he was most clear-headed. Other than being able to clearly feel the intense pain and torment, there was nothing else. Although the 3 of them had all opened their 7th meridian, there was still a great disparity in strength. Tuanzi's bloodline was the purest, and it possessed absolute suppression and strength. Although Yi Zhao had been severely injured, he was still much stronger than Yi Gong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have ascended to the position of clan leader, while Yi Gong was only the Grand Elder. Moreover, Yi Gong was now covered in wounds. That cluster of flames, wrapped in a powerful aura, burned through Yi Gong's body inch by inch. The Yu Qian's whistle quickly reached the illusory god palace. Jinyun Lai, who was meditating in his room, suddenly opened his eyes and looked outside with a grave expression. Then he got up without hesitation and walked outside. Just as he walked a distance, he ran into Xu Jing, who was hurrying over. Jinyun Lai narrowed her eyes slightly. Xu Jing's residence was not there. It seemed that she had gone to deliver medicine to the 6th divine emissary. When he had followed them that day, he had wanted to listen to what the 2 of them were talking about. Unfortunately, the 6th divine emissary had always been vigilant. Especially after coming back this time, he had directly laid down layers of enchantments outside the courtyard. As soon as he approached, he would definitely be noticed. In the end, Jinyun Lai did not step forward. As for what the 2 of them were talking about inside, he had no idea. The only thing he knew was that when Xu Jing left that day, he didn't look too happy. He originally thought that the 2 of them had a conflict, but after that, Xu Jing still sent medicine to Tianlei every day. Jinyun Lai was curious, but she didn't ask. The divine envoys each had their own duties, and their relationship with each other was not close. He didn't have much contact with the 6th divine emissary in the past, so there was no reason for him to inquire about him now. At this moment, Xu Jing also saw him. Panic flashed across her face for a moment, but it disappeared in a flash. If Jianhua didn't know her well, it would be difficult for him to catch the change in her emotions. Jianhua walked forward and asked, "Do you know what happened at the Thunder Reservoir?" Xu Jing heaved a sigh of relief and shook her head. "I don't know. I only came here because I heard about the second divine emissary." Jianhua slowly clenched her hands behind her back. In fact, the fourth divine emissary had already sent a warning shot. At that time he wanted to go over. However, when he saw that the second divine emissary had directly taken action, he stopped thinking about it. He originally thought that if the second divine emissary personally took action, everything would be smoothly resolved. Who knew that not long after, the second divine emissary's order came? Something big must have happened at the Thunder Reservoir. However, according to Xu Jing's words, she didn't notice the fourth divine emissary's warning? What was she busy with at that time? As if Jianhunlai's gaze made him feel weak, Xu Jing's brows furrowed. If the second divine emissary is like this, there must be a lot of trouble. Let's go over as soon as possible. Jianhunlai softly nodded. In a flash, he headed towards the pool of lightning. Xu Jing exhaled slowly. She turned around and looked at him with a complicated expression. Then, she immediately followed him. "Second brother, did you hear the whistle just now?" Little Hachi was fiddling with herbs in the courtyard. When she heard the sound, she stopped what she was doing and looked back. Xuanhuan narrowed her eyes. "That's the direction of the Thunder Reservoir. It seems that four divine emissary hasn't returned yet." Little Hachi got up and ran over excitedly. "Second brother, should we go and take a look?" "You're not allowed to go." "Don't go." Two voices sounded at the same time. Little Hachi turned around. "Big brother? Lord Yanqing?" These two people actually came out of the room at the same time. Moreover, they didn't let her go? She pursed her lips and muttered softly. "I just said that I wanted to go and take a look. If you don't want to go, then don't go. Why are you so fierce?" These two people were even fierce to her. Cini looked at Yanqing. Their gazes met. After a moment, Cini walked outside. "I'll go and take a look." Little Hachi's eyes widened in shock. Xuanhuan also looked over in surprise. "Big brother, you want to go personally?" Ever since he came to the illusory god palace, he hadn't stepped out of the door even once. Now he wanted to go to the Thunder Reservoir? Cini nodded. His long and narrow eyes were as deep as the sea. Digression, 6 p.m. Chapter 2296. Changwanzhou also walked out. "I'll go too." Cini shook his head. "No need. The god envoys of the illusion god palace should be heading to the lightning pool. It would be troublesome if too many people went. There's nothing to see here." Since it involved several god envoys, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. If they went forward now, they would be implicated if they weren't careful. Chang Wanzhou's exquisite face showed a hint of hesitation, but it quickly dissipated as he nodded. "Okay." Little Hachi was very curious. Why did all of them come out one by one? But seeing Cinyi's expression, it seemed that this matter wasn't small, so she didn't insist and decided to wait here. Thinking of this, she glanced at Rong Xiu's room and whispered, "It's strange. Since everyone is going, why didn't His Highness Saint come out?" Yen Qing paused. "Master has been in seclusion recently." Seclusion? Little Hachi blinked. This was strange. In her impression, Rong Xiu had always been leisurely. It was rare to see him in seclusion. But this was the illusion god palace, and the competition from all sides had increased. Especially since Master was in the limelight recently. It was normal for His Highness Saint to want to raise his cultivation as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Little Hachi relaxed and sat down. "Big brother, go and come back early." She wasn't worried at all about whether Cinyi could deal with the situation over there. Cinyi nodded lightly and left. Lightning pool. The people standing on the shore fell into a long and torturous wait. At this time, every minute and every second seemed to be elongated. What was that sound just now? Is the second god envoy summoning the other god envoys? What the hell is going on? Why would there be such a huge commotion? If even the second god envoy can't deal with it, I'm afraid. There were different opinions. Many people felt a little worried. In the illusion god palace, the god envoys had noble statuses and were a symbol of strength. This was especially true for the second oracle. In recent years, the first messenger rarely showed himself. Most of the important matters were left to the second messenger. This time he had personally made an appearance, yet it was still not enough? Aren't you curious? For such a terrifying flame to suddenly surge out from the lightning pool, It was clearly suppressing the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, right? Besides, to be able to cause such a big commotion, it's definitely not an ordinary crimson gold celestial phoenix. But isn't the crimson gold sky phoenix clan a sinful clan of the illusion god palace? They haven't appeared for tens of thousands of years, right? Why would it suddenly erupt at this time? Who knows? However, if this conjecture was true, then I was even more curious. Who exactly was being suppressed down there? All right. Do you remember the rumor that xuanhuan you had two contracted mythological beasts? One of them was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. I saw her rushing in just now. Could it be related to her? As soon as this guess was made, it immediately attracted the attention of many people. Someone raised his voice and asked, Song Qing, you guys came up together. Is this the situation? Many people looked at Song Qing with different expressions. Song Qing frowned and didn't say anything. His gaze fell on Mitsui. Why would they ask him about this kind of thing? As Chu Liu's subordinate, Mitsui should know better, right? Of course, he also knew that these people didn't ask Mitsui mainly because they were afraid of him. Ever since the lightning pool exploded, the freakish strength he displayed was truly shocking. Everyone knew that this person was not to be offended. Mitsui pretended not to see it. He clenched the lightning hammer in his hand and focused on the front. His ears twitched slightly. A rustling sound seemed to be faintly discernible in his ears. As time passed, the sound became clearer and clearer. Dong dong. Dong dong. This was the sound of the Tianlei that was locked in the endless reef under the lightning pool. It was constantly attacking and trying to break out. At this time, the blazing flames that filled the sky were flowing at a much slower speed than before. However, the pressure from it didn't weaken at all. I wonder what's going on down there. Mitsui held his breath. Swoosh, swoosh. Two figures arrived one after another. Everyone looked up. They were Jianhu and Xu Jing. The divine envoys usually had their own things to do. Jianhu and Xu Jing were in charge of the Star Path and Herb Mountain respectively, so they had the most freedom in terms of time and naturally came the fastest. Seeing the scene in front of them, the two of them were shocked even though they were prepared. The golden flames kept surging wildly and almost completely overturned half of the lightning pool. The dark sky was also illuminated by the flames. Between heaven and earth there was chaos. This is Yizhao self-immolated? Jianhu couldn't help but murmur in shock. Xu Jing hesitated for a moment, then quickly made up her mind and rushed toward the lightning pool. Jianhu was about to call out to her, but she saw that her figure was already far away. She had no choice but to immediately follow. What? The two of them rushed into the lightning pool. Seeing this scene, everyone was even more worried. For so many years, the Illusion God Palace has never had such a big trouble. It actually alarmed several divine envoys at the same time. Let's retreat a little more. The fire is almost burning to the shore. I wonder what's going on down there? Mitsui was a little restless. However, just as he was about to move, a familiar fluctuation came from behind him. He subconsciously turned around and looked with a face full of surprise. Big brother? Sun Yi's arrival didn't attract too much attention. After all, at this time, everyone's attention was on the divine envoys and the lightning pool. Sun Yi's gaze swept past him and finally landed on the letter at his waist. Watch it. He raised his chin and said calmly. Mitsui lowered his head and saw that the words in the letter had unknowingly become thicker and clearer than before, as if they would burst out at any time. His heart thumped rapidly and his large rough hand brushed over it. Only then did the faint fluctuation calm down, and the words on it returned to their original state. Thank you, big brother. As Mitsui spoke, he saw Sun Yi step forward and hurriedly asked, Big brother, are you going to the lightning pool too? I'll go with you. Sun Yi glanced at him. You can just stay here. Mitsui scratched his head regretfully. All right. I'll wait here for Master and Big Brother to return. Sun Yi grunted and his figure flashed, quickly disappearing into the lightning pool. The lightning pool had already fallen into complete chaos. Before Jianhu and Xu Jing completely arrived, they were already restrained by the crazily surging Tianlei around them, and their speed clearly slowed down. Yu Qian raised his eyes and glanced over. Then he raised his wrist. The seal instantly stirred up a wave, scattering the Tianlei. Only then were the two of them able to escape. Almost at the same time, a figure arrived behind the two of them. Taking advantage of Yu Qian's strength, he successfully avoided the entanglement of the Tianlei. Yu Qian frowned. This aura was extremely unfamiliar. Who was so presumptuous to come down at this time? He impatiently glanced at the person who came, and then his pupils constricted. Chapter 2297. This figure, this temperament, it was clearly very similar to. He opened his mouth and was about to call for someone. But before he could finish speaking, he saw the person's appearance clearly. Handsome features with an indifferent expression, but it was a completely unfamiliar face. The rest of Yu Qian's words were stuck in his throat. His eyes were like an eagle's as he stared at the person with incomparably sharp eyes. It was a young man who looked to be about 28 or 29 years old. He was dressed in a green robe and had a thin and tall figure. His long and narrow eyes were indifferent and calm. As if sensing his gaze, that person looked over. Their gazes met. In just a moment, the other party took the lead to look away and to the side. An extremely strange feeling suddenly surged in Yu Qian's heart. This person, second oracle. Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing arrived in front of Yu Qian and saw that his expression was a little strange. The two looked at each other, then turned back to look. Xu Jing was also shocked. This is, after taking a closer look, her wildly beating heart finally calmed down. But the deep fear that would involuntarily arise when she thought of a certain person lingered in her heart for a long time before it gradually dissipated. "Cini, why are you here?" Jin Yunlai's brows furrowed slightly. Just now, she and Xu Jing didn't notice that there was someone following behind them. Yu Qian and Xu Jing both looked at Jin Yunlai. "Yunlai, you know him?" Yu Qian slowly asked in a deep voice. Jin Yunlai nodded. Of course she knew why Yu Qian asked this. This Cini was indeed somewhat similar to that person. When she first saw Cini, she was also very surprised. He's Xuanhuan Yu's subordinate and has been here for a while. It's just that he doesn't seem to have come out. The others in the illusory god palace might not know him, let alone the oracles. Only then did Yu Qian relax and nod. So he was here for her. He glanced at Cini again before retracting his gaze. It was just her eminence, so there was nothing to worry about. You two go over there and prepare to use the soul-locking seal. Hearing this, the two of them were shocked. Soul-lock seal? This was a special seal that required several divine envoys to work together in order to cast it. Under normal circumstances they would never use it. Is this because of Yizhao? He looked up and saw that not far away the golden Tianlei was still flowing around, stirring up the surrounding Tianlei and devouring it. As for the reddish gold flames inside, they burned even more fiercely. Tianlei shouldn't be the fourth oracle. Jin Yunlai was halfway through her words when she saw Mu Dongyu's ugly expression. She stopped abruptly. There's not much time left. Let's end this quickly. Yu Qian's voice was cold. Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing were both shocked. Yes. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them dispersed. At this moment, they were all standing around the ball of fire, facing each other, forming a rhombus. Suddenly Xu Jing frowned. In front of her, a figure was faintly discernible in the dazzling light. There's someone else in there? She was so shocked that she lost her voice. Even she felt very uncomfortable standing there and almost couldn't get any closer. How could someone directly enter that place? Moreover, that figure looked somewhat familiar. Ignore her, Yu Qian said coldly. If it weren't for Chu Luiyue, they might have solved the problem by now. She's just digging her own grave. Anyway, she had already broken the contract with Dumpling. It didn't matter whether she was alive or dead. Xu Jing took a deep breath. It's actually her. However, Yu Qian was right. Under such circumstances, doing this was tantamount to courting death. She was originally dissatisfied with her, but she didn't expect the opportunity to vent her anger so quickly. Whoosh! She retracted her gaze and a stream of divine power flew out of her hand. Almost at the same time, Mu Dongyu and Jin Yunlai also made a move. Several streams of divine power intertwined with each other and quickly condensed into a special pattern. A terrifying pressure gradually spread out from the inside. Dumpling poured another cluster of flames into Yi Gong's body. At this moment, his body was already covered in wounds and bloodstains. Some of the wounds were so deep that bones could be seen. He lowered his head and blood kept flowing out of the corner of his mouth. Although the aura around him was much stronger than before, his mind had already reached its limit. Yi Gong's mind was dizzy. The so-called living hell. He finally experienced it today. If he had the slightest room to resist, he wouldn't have let himself fall into such a situation. Tuanzi looked him up and down and finally nodded with satisfaction. Done? Yi Gong's eyebrows twitched. Done? What was done? He had a bad feeling, but at this moment he didn't even have the strength to raise his head and open his eyes. Then he felt that Dumpling seemed to have moved. She came to the middle of Yi Gong and Yizhao. Grandpa Patriarch, don't worry, I'll bring you out now. Yizhao originally didn't realize what Dumpling was planning to do, but later on, when he saw Dumpling continuously pouring those flames into Yigong's body, he vaguely guessed something. Now that he heard her say that as expected, his expression changed and a trace of hesitation flashed across his face. Dumpling, this is too dangerous for you. Moreover, you can't open these chains. When he sensed that Dumpling had opened her 7th meridian, he set himself on fire just to summon her over and give her some instructions. At the same time, he could also take care of Yigong. He didn't expect her to have such thoughts. Dumpling gritted her teeth and glared at the chains. These were exactly the same as the black chains that trapped her back then. At that time, she couldn't do anything about these things, but it didn't mean that she couldn't do anything now. She took a step forward and grabbed the black chains tightly. Then, she shook it fiercely. Rumble. A loud sound suddenly came from the depths of the lightning pool. This time, it instantly set off a stormy sea. Chapter 2298. This power spread out instantly, causing Yu Qian and the others to almost lose their balance. The soul-locking seal that they were about to use also swayed and could not be stabilized. Hearing the sound of the chains, Yu Qian's expression turned even darker. Were they planning to bring Yizhao out? TSK, they were just dreaming. The chains were extremely tough. Even though Dumpling had opened her 7th meridian, she could not break them. A beam of light surged out of his palm as he continued to condense the soul-locking seal. The chains shook violently. The black mist on them surged, but there were no signs of them breaking. Dumpling frowned deeply. This thing was really troublesome. Dumpling, don't waste your time. I have a few words to say to you. Yizhao was almost at his limit. His voice was extremely weak. Tuanzi's eyes suddenly turned red, and her grape-like big eyes were instantly filled with tears. Grandpa clan leader, I will definitely save you. She had finally opened her 7th meridian and came here. How could she miss such a rare opportunity? Yizhao's cracked lips curled up slightly. However, because his body was exhausted, it was very strenuous. Dark red blood seeped out of it. Dumpling, my clan's ancestor, back then, wasn't a traitor of the illusory god palace, was. He opened his mouth with difficulty. Every time he spat out a word, it felt like something was scraping his throat. It was painful. Dumpling held back her tears, but her voice was choked with sobs. Grandpa clan leader, Dumpling, don't listen. It's the same if you give it to me after you get out. As she spoke, a cluster of golden flames burned on her small hand. Bang. She struck the chains with her palm. There was a muffled sound. However, the chain still did not break. Not even a mark was left. Dumpling held her breath and struck again. Intense pain came from her hand, but it was not even a millionth of the anxiety in her heart. Why couldn't it open? Why couldn't it open? Chu Luiyue stood outside the giant net of golden Tianlei. She could not see the situation inside through the brilliant light of the Tianlei in flames. However, she and Dumpling were telepathic and naturally knew what the situation was. Chu Luiyue's brows were tightly knitted. She knew how difficult it was to deal with the black chains. Now, Dumpling's strength alone was probably not enough. At this moment, a strange fluctuation suddenly came from the interspatial ring. Chu Luiyue was dazed as she saw a purple light flash across her eyes. That piece of purple scale armor suddenly appeared. Her heart suddenly, she reached out to grab on it. This was something that belonged to Debao. Once it was exposed, swoosh. Without any hesitation, the purple scales charged towards the ball of fire. Chu Luiyue's to her heart instantly to her throat. However, in the next moment, the scene that happened in front of her caused her eyes to flash with a deep shock. That piece of purple scale armor actually pierced through the defensive barrier formed by the golden heavenly lightning and quickly sank into the reddish-gold flames. The Tianlei did not dodge in time and was cut in half from the middle. After a short silence, the golden Tianlei exploded with a bang and turned into countless streaks of light, scattering in all directions. Chu Luiyue sucked in a cold breath. What was the origin of the scale armor left by Debao? How could it be so sharp and terrifying? At the same time, Dumpling, who was in the center of the flames, also heard the sound. She stopped and looked back. A purple scale armor flashed in front of her eyes. The strong wind blew the golden bell on her head. The music was crisp. Then she heard a very subtle cutting sound. She looked in the direction of the sound. She saw that the black chain that was tightly wrapped around Yizhao was easily cut in half by the scale armor. Dumpling did not even think and immediately waved the ancestor's golden feather in her hand. A flame flew out and grabbed Yi Zhao's wrist. Then it quickly pulled him out of the flame. A strange scene appeared. The black chains that had been broken apart were quickly reconnecting with each other. Black fog surrounded them. Dumpling could clearly see that the broken chain was beginning to repair itself. She waved her wrist again. Yi Gong's body flew over uncontrollably. At the same time, a ball of flame suddenly burned on his body. It was the flame that belonged to Yi Zhao that Dumpling had collected previously. At this moment, the flame wrapped around him, causing his aura to be no different from Yi Zhao's. Whoosh, sensing this aura, the black chain flew over quickly and wrapped around Yi Gong tightly. Dumpling calmed down and looked at Yi Zhao. Grandpa clan leader. Let's go now. Yi Zhao came back to his senses. If he left like this, he would not be able to conceal his aura and would be exposed sooner or later. He did not care about himself, but the key was that he could not implicate Dumpling. His expression was firm. Dumpling stepped back. Dumpling was stunned, but still obediently took a few steps back. Grandpa clan leader, you want to... Boom. Before she could finish, Yi Zhao's body suddenly burst into flames. Dumpling's eyes widened. Before she could say anything, she felt a fierce heat wave coming from the front. Her body flew back uncontrollably. An extremely dense flame wrapped around Yi Zhao's translucent soul and quickly flew into the ancestor's golden feather in her hand. At the same time, Yi Gong's body was instantly engulfed and burned. Chu Luiyue sensed that something was wrong. Just as she was about to move, she saw Dumpling's figure flying towards her. She hurriedly went forward and hugged Dumpling. The scorching heat wave tore through the cage formed by the golden Tianlei and attacked in all directions. Seeing this, Chu Luiyue turned around without hesitation and protected Dumpling firmly. However, the expected burning pain did not come. A familiar voice sounded in front of her. Master. Chu Luiyue looked up. Cini. She had placed all her attention on Dumpling and did not know that Cini was here too. Master, this place is dangerous. We should leave as soon as possible. Cini said calmly. Chu Luiyue suddenly realized something and turned back. A transparent barrier had appeared behind her at some point, isolating her from the surging power. This was Cini's doing. This thing can't last for long. Cini said. Chu Luiyue immediately nodded. Let's go. With a thought, she threw out the flowing cloud flying diagram and stepped into it. Cini turned back to take a look. The golden cage had been completely torn apart. Countless golden flames erupted like magma and surged in all directions. The soul-locking seal that Yu Qian and the others hadn't had the time to use was instantly dispersed, and they were forced to retreat in a sorry state by the impact of this force. He calmly retracted his gaze and followed. Chapter 2299. The huge commotion that erupted within the lightning pool caused everyone who was watching from the periphery to be stunned. The tyrannical Tianlei power swept in all directions as if it had gone crazy. Huge waves surged into the sky. Even the ground beneath their feet began to tremble violently. Retreat. Someone shouted, and everyone immediately retreated in a hurry. But Shijing did not move. Instead he frowned. How did it end up like this? He stomped his foot. Those Tianlei that were about to charge over had silently reduced their speed. By the time they reached his feet, they had almost no attack power. If someone was paying attention, they would definitely notice that something was wrong. But now, everyone's attention was focused in the distance. How could they care about Shijing? Moreover, the edge of the lightning pool was extremely long. His small spot was not conspicuous at all. Therefore, not a single person noticed the abnormality on Shijing's side. At this moment, a stream of light suddenly flashed in the sky above the lightning pool. Then two figures walked out, one in front and one behind. It was Chu Luiyue and Cini. Swoosh. Chu Luiyue put away the flowing cloud flying diagram and heaved a sigh of relief. Dumpling hugged her neck tightly. She was still holding the ancestor's golden feather in her hand. Chu Luiyue looked down. The huge lightning pool had completely fallen into chaos. Countless Tianlei were flowing in all directions. There were even several streaks of golden light mixed in. Those were the scattered golden Tianlei. At the same time, red gold flames burned fiercely. Looking down from above, this place had completely turned into a sea of fire. Then a few figures rushed out. It was Yu Qian and the others. They floated in the air and attacked together. Clearly, they planned to continue suppressing the lightning pool. In this situation, they had no choice but to do so. Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling in her arms. Dumpling was leaning on her shoulder. She did not make a sound. The tip of her sharp nose was red. Chu Luiyue's heart ached as she kissed her forehead. Dumpling, be good. Let's go back. Dumpling's heart ached. The tears that she had been holding back for a long time finally fell. Big drops of tears, sparkling and translucent, fell down like pearls from a broken necklace. Chu Liyue's clothes were quickly wet. She held the ancestor's golden feather tightly and buried her head in Chu Liyue's shoulder. She whimpered softly. Okay. Chu Liyue brought Dumpling back to Phoenix Cry. Tsunyi did not follow. Instead, he came to Mitsui's side and raised his chin at him. It's time to go. Shijing went and asked worriedly. Are Master and Tuanzi all right? Tsunyi shook his head. Everything is going. As for the lightning pool, it would probably take a long time for it to recover after this storm. Shijing's heart. Thank you, big brother. I got it. After Tsunyi finished speaking, he looked into the distance. The figures of Yu Qian and the others seemed especially small in the sea of fire. He narrowed his eyes. After a moment, he turned and left. Chu Liyue originally wanted to bring Dumpling back to her residence, but after thinking about it, she decided to return to Phoenix Cry Mountain. On one hand, on the surface, she no longer had anything to do with Dumpling. If she brought her back just like that, it was very likely to cause some trouble. On the other hand, Phoenix Cry Mountain was the place where the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix ancestor used to live. It was quiet and safe. When they came here, Tuanzi's small body was still crying and twitching. Chu Liyue sighed softly in her heart. Actually, she had already successfully swapped Yi Zhao and Yi Gong. She only needed to escape. But Yi Zhao still chose to do so. There was only one reason. He wanted to completely ensure Dumpling's safety. Even though their auras had been swapped, there were still all kinds of hidden dangers. Yi Zhao destroyed his own body and hid in the ancestor's golden feather. He also took the opportunity to destroy Yi Gong's body, causing his soul to be trapped in the depths of the lightning pool forever. This way, even if anyone had suspicions and investigated, they wouldn't be able to find anything. Because Yi Gong had already opened his 7th meridian, and he was using Yi Zhao's aura and power. These were enough to completely cover Yi Gong's bloodline aura. Moreover, after suffering such a terrifying impact, Yi Gong was almost dead. This secret would be buried forever. Chu Liyue didn't say anything. She only hugged Dumpling and patted her back gently. Dumpling liked to cry often. But she rarely saw her like this. She didn't say a word and only kept crying. She must be extremely sad to be like this. Chu Liyue's heart also felt like it was being kneaded into a ball by something. It was extremely uncomfortable and stifling. A gentle breeze blew. It was quiet all around. Even the scorching hot aura on Fengming Mountain had become much gentler. After an unknown period of time, Dumpling's tears finally stopped. She raised her head and looked at Chu Liyue. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Sparkling tears still hung on her thick and long eyelashes. Why you? She spoke with a hoarse voice. Isn't Dumpling too useless? Chu Liyue was stunned. Why do you ask? Dumpling was silent for a long time before continuing. If I'm powerful enough, I won't. What happened today wouldn't have happened. Chu Liyue shook her head and gently wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Dumpling, you've already done very well. To be able to open the 7th meridian in such a short period of time, Dumpling was probably the only one in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan who could do it. Although Yi Zhao's body was damaged, he still managed to escape successfully and save his life. This was already the best result so far. In the future, if there was a chance in the future, it might not be impossible to help Yi Zhao reconstruct his body. Dumpling nodded and whispered into Chu Liyue's ear, Grandpa clan leader is asleep. Chu Liyue was startled at first, but then he understood. It must be because Yi Zhao was too crazy previously that he fell into a coma. However, if he stayed in the ancestor's golden feather for a period of time, he might be much better. After Dumpling finished crying, her emotions finally calmed down. Since things had already come to this, she could only choose to accept it. When she continued to open her meridians in the future, she would be able to save Grandpa clan leader. Right. Dumpling suddenly remembered something. She frowned and looked at Chu Liyue. Grandpa clan leader mentioned Ancestor before. He said that Ancestor didn't betray the palace of the illusory god back then. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. And then that's it. Dumpling shook her head. Grandpa clan leader didn't have time to finish? At that time she was focused on saving him and didn't listen carefully. Now that she thought about it, she realized that this should be an extremely important matter. After all, it was related to Ancestor. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. There was indeed something fishy about what happened back then. If Yi Ling didn't choose to betray back then, why would there be so many rumors later? She looked up at the palace of the illusory god not far away. Who was the current master of the palace of the illusory god? Chapter 2300. Yu Qian and the rest of the divine envoys worked together to quell the lightning pool's riot. It took them 3 days and 3 nights to calm everything down. The huge soul lock seal floated quietly, sealing the entire lightning pool. Countless Tianlei swam under it. From afar, it looked like a thick layer of ice had frozen on the surface of the sea, suppressing everything. A faint glow flickered on the soul lock seal, cold and dazzling. Yu Qian's face was cold as he stared at the soul lock seal for a long time. The others beside him were also silent. The air seemed to have frozen. Although they had temporarily calmed it down with the soul lock seal, the lightning pool would remain in its current state for a long time. This was something that had never happened in the past 10,000 years. Even when Yi Zhao was imprisoned here, there hadn't been such a big commotion. After a long time, Yu Qian looked at Mu Dongyu and asked in a deep voice, "Now, how much control do you have over the Tianlei power in the lightning pool?" Mu Dongyu hesitated for a moment and said, "Half." This was already improving. When he was at his breaking point, he almost lost control of the entire lightning pool. It wasn't until the soul lock seal suppressed it that he gradually regained control of the Tianlei. However, this didn't make Mu Dongyu's mood better. He was the 4th divine envoy. From the day he ascended to this position, he was responsible for guarding the lightning pool. It had been 10,000 years. However, when the lightning pool rebelled, he couldn't help it all. He was even trapped inside and almost lost his life. No one would believe this if word got out. As expected, Yu Qian's face turned colder. "All these years, is this how you guard the lightning pool?" Mu Dongyu's heart skipped a beat. He immediately bowed his head and admitted his guilt. "Dongyu has failed in his duty. Please punish me, 2nd divine envoy." "You didn't fail in your duty. You were incompetent." Yu Qian sneered and said mercilessly. Mu Dongyu choked and his face turned pale, but he couldn't think of any rebuttal. He couldn't refute this point. He had to admit it even if he didn't want to. Jianghu suddenly said, "2nd divine envoy, the main reason for the lightning pool's sudden outburst was Yi Zhao. Fortunately, he managed to keep his life. Without a physical body, what's the use of a soul?" Yu Qian raised his voice, his expression cold. Jianghu shut her mouth. Yu Qian closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying his best to suppress the anger in his heart. Now was not the time to punish Mu Dongyu. Besides, if he was deposed, no one would be able to replace him in a short time. Unlike Xu Jing, Mu Dongyu was very important to the Thunder Pool and was basically irreplaceable. This was because the divine body he cultivated was very special. It could withstand more Tianlei power than the others. Ordinary people couldn't even get close to the depths of the Thunder Pool, but Mu Dongyu could stay here all year round. Therefore, even if Yu Qian was furious, he couldn't just replace Mu Dongyu. Xu Jing's eyes flickered as she said softly, "2nd divine envoy, Yi Zhao did this because he knew that Yi Gong had betrayed the clan and was furious. That was why he killed him at all costs. Now he has achieved his goal, but he has also fallen into a coma. Fortunately, the most important one should be fine for the time being." She was talking about Dumpling. Thinking of Dumpling, Yu Qian's expression improved a little. That's right. Yi Gong's soul was destroyed, and Yi Zhao had also fallen into a coma. Fortunately, Dumpling wasn't affected too much. "Has Xuanhuan brought her back?" he asked in a low voice. Xu Jing nodded. "She left as soon as the incident happened. She ran really fast. He thought that she would definitely die here this time, but who knew?" Xu Jing lowered her eyes to hide the emotions in her eyes. Dumpling now had a very high status in the 2nd divine envoy's heart. She knew very well that no matter what, she couldn't touch this red line. "You're quite smart," Yu Qian said, but no emotion could be heard in his voice. However, it was obvious that Yu Qian was quite certain that Chu Luiwa had risked her life to save Dumpling. After all, Dumpling had just opened her 7th meridian. If anything happened to her now, Yu Qian would really vomit blood. Xu Jing felt a little uncomfortable. She smiled and said, "I heard that she has already broken the contract with Dumpling. I didn't expect her to still be so concerned. No wonder the 2nd divine envoy allowed her to enter Fengming Mountain as she pleased." Yu Qian glanced at her coldly. "Xu Jing, are you unhappy?" Xu Jing hurriedly lowered her head. "Xu Jing doesn't dare. I know you don't like Xuanhuan." Yu Qian stared at her indifferently. "I have to say that your right to manage the Herb Mountain has been taken back because of her. However, this is ultimately your problem. I only want to warn you one thing, don't touch her. No matter what, she is the person Dumpling values the most." If anything happens to her, no one can guarantee what Dumpling will do. So, keep your hands and feet clean. Don't touch Fengming Mountain, understand? The last sentence was a blatant threat. Xu Jing's heart trembled. She could no longer maintain the expression on her face. Yes, Xu Jing understands. Yu Qin looked at Mu Dongyu. I will transfer the 9th and 10th divine envoys over later. From today onwards, the 3 of you will take turns guarding this lightning pool. If you find anything unusual, report it immediately. Yes. After giving these instructions, Mu Dongyu quickly left. Only then did the atmosphere loosen up a little. Jinyun Lai said, since the 2nd divine envoy has already made arrangements, I will take my leave first. Mu Dongyu nodded. Then she suddenly thought of something and called out to him, wait. Jinyun Lai turned around. 4th divine envoy, is there anything else? Mu Dongyu hesitated for a moment before asking, do you know much about that Sin Yi? 4th divine envoy, what do you mean by that? Jinyun Lai was a little surprised. She didn't expect him to suddenly mention Sin Yi. Mu Dongyu said, I saw him attack just now. He seems to be quite powerful. Even though the situation was very chaotic back then, he still saw Sin Yi take action and help Chu Luiyue block the attack. Jinyun Lai nodded. In fact, it's not just Sin Yi. The subordinates that Xuanhuan you brought over are also considered to be talented and powerful. It's just that, they don't have bloodline totems. It was also because of this that he didn't take these people to heart. Mu Dongyu nodded. I remember now. Xuanhuan Yu and Xu Jing are also like this. Since they didn't have bloodline totems, there was no hope for them to become gods in the future. He waved his hand. Forget it. In the dark and cramped cage, Dugu Mabao sat quietly. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. After a moment, a hoarse voice sounded. You can't even protect yourself and you still want to save Yi Zhao? Dugu Mabao opened his eyes. His purple eyes were clear and deep. He is Yi Ling's descendant. I have to protect him. Chapter 2301. The man chuckled. Yi Ling has been dead for tens of thousands of years. What's the point of bringing him up? Besides, didn't you fail to protect him back then? Why do you have to do something so useless now? Dugu Mabao clenched his fists on his knees and clenched his jaw. There seemed to be a layer of frost between his eyebrows. After a long while he said, in comparison, what you've done is useless, isn't it? Do you think the palace of the illusory god can be lit with the blood of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? If it's not yours, you shouldn't have dreamed about it from the start. The voice fell silent. After a long while it said, you'll know whether it's mine or not. The atmosphere in the palace of the illusory god had been very unusual recently. Nan Jinshu paced back and forth in his room with a conflicted expression. He had been in the palace of the illusory god for a long time, but except for the 7th divine envoy at the heaven gate, he hadn't seen any other divine envoys. Moreover, even the 7th divine emissary had only told him to stay here and cultivate properly, and had never come again. Nan Jinshu was a little anxious. He felt that his efficiency was a little slow. If he didn't think of a way, it would be extremely difficult for him to become a god. After hesitating for a long time, Nan Jinshu finally made up his mind and walked out of the door. Just as he reached the entrance of the courtyard, he saw a familiar figure. Jun Jiuqing? Jun Jiuqing turned his head and looked over when he heard the voice. Nan Jinshu quickly walked forward but changed the way he addressed him. Head of family Yi, where are you going? Jun Jiuqing's lips curled into a devilish smile. What else can I do in the palace of the illusory god? Nan Jinshu didn't know how to respond. He paused for a moment before continuing. Head of family Yi, have you seen the 1st divine envoy during this time? Jun Jiuqing shook his head and narrowed his eyes. I heard that the 1st divine envoy has been in seclusion for many years and hasn't come out for a long time. Even the other divine envoys have been rejected. What's the matter? Does the head of the Nan family want to see the 1st divine envoy? Nan Jinshu nodded. He felt a little troubled after hearing Jun Jiuqing's words. If that's the case, then it will be very difficult to meet the 1st divine envoy. Currently, many of the affairs of the illusory god palace have been handed over to the 2nd divine envoy. If the patriarch of the Nan family has any questions, you can ask the 2nd divine envoy. Why do you have to see the 1st divine envoy? This? Nan Jinshu hesitated. He looked around to make sure that there was no one around before he took a step forward and lowered his voice. To tell you the truth, family E, I want to go to the illusionary god C. Jun Jiuqing's expression changed slightly as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Oh. Nan Jinshu didn't want to talk too much with Jun Jiuqing. After all, the relationship between the two families had changed after the incident at Peach Blossom Dock. However, he and Jun Jiuqing were both latecomers and had little to do with what had happened before. Besides, the heaven gate of the illusory god palace had been opened and the two of them had entered the palace of the illusory god, so they should work together. After thinking about it, Nan Jinshu told Jun Jiuqing his thoughts. I wanted to go to the Thunder Pool to cultivate and improve my cultivation, but now that the Thunder Pool has been sealed and I don't know when it will be opened again, I don't think I can count on it. So, I thought that maybe going to the illusionary god sea is a good choice. However, the illusionary god sea has always been under the control of the first divine envoy. If I want to go there, I have to get the first divine envoy's permission, so... Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows and said with a faint smile, Family E, don't be afraid. The illusionary god sea is not an ordinary place. It's unimaginably dangerous. Are you sure you want to go? Nan Jinshu also smiled with a meaningful look on his face. That's right. The illusionary god sea is extremely dangerous for ordinary people, but it's different for you and me. Family E, I don't think I need to remind you of some things, right? If he wasn't prepared, he wouldn't have thought about it. Jun Jiuqing nodded. So, family head Nan has made up your mind? Nan Jinshu simply nodded and admitted it, then said, yes. Why don't you go with me, family head Nan? Jun Jiuqing's thin lips curled into a faint smile. No need. I don't have such plans for now. Nan Jinshu was stunned and his expression became a little complicated. Jun Jiuqing's talent and strength were above his. Even if he didn't use any other methods, he would definitely be able to reach the immortal level in the future. He was unwilling to accept it and was unwilling to accept it. But there was no reason for such things. Nan Jinshu suppressed his emotions and said, if that's the case, I won't disturb you. But please don't tell anyone about what happened today, family head Nan. Of course. Jun Jiuqing raised his hand and pointed in a certain direction. That should be the first divine envoy's courtyard. Family head Nan can go and ask. However, the first divine envoy hasn't appeared for many years. Family head Nan should be prepared to be rejected. Nan Jinshu smiled as if he didn't care. I know. Jun Jiuqing was about to leave, but when he heard Nan Jinshu's relaxed tone, he couldn't help but look at him again. Family head Nan, you seem very certain that the first divine envoy will let you go to the Mirage God Ocean? Nan Jinshu's eyebrows twitched and he laughed. How can I be that capable? I just want to give it a try. Family head Nan, I'll take my leave now. Jun Jiuqing didn't pursue the matter and responded with a smile. Then I wish family head Nan all the best. Nan Jinshu left quickly. Jun Jiuqing stared at his back for a while and rubbed his chin thoughtfully. He didn't have much contact with Nan Jinshu, but he knew a little about him. Nan Jinshu's talent was limited and he wasn't capable enough. If it weren't for the fact that most of the capable people in the Nan family were dead, he wouldn't have been able to become the family head. If he had to talk about his strength, it was just that he was more quick-witted than the average person and could see the right opportunity. This was also an important reason why he was able to become the family head. Nan Jinshu was usually cautious and wouldn't take action if he wasn't confident enough. This time, however, it was a little unusual. After being in the Mirage God Palace for so long, Nan Jinshu couldn't not know what was going on with the first divine envoy, but he still insisted on going. He must have some kind of trump card. Interesting, Jun Jiuqing murmured to himself. In the end, he chose to follow them silently. Nan Jinshu arrived at the first divine envoy's courtyard without a hitch. The door was shut tight and it was cold and lonely. Those who didn't know better would think that no one had been here for many years. Nan Jinshu bowed. First divine envoy, Nan Jinshu of the Nan family requests an audience. No one answered. Nan Jinshu waited for a while, thinking that it was indeed difficult to meet this person. He took half a step forward and said, First divine envoy, I heard that the Mirage God Palace has been looking for the third zither score all these years? Chapter 2302. After Yu Qian left the lightning pool, he went straight back to Fengming Mountain. Dumpling was nestled in Chu Liyue's arms, and the two of them were whispering to each other. Sensing his movements, the two of them looked up at the same time. Dumpling immediately became alert. She jumped out of Chu Liyue's arms and blocked in front of her. Yu Qian came in front of her and first scanned Dumpling from head to toe. After confirming that she was safe and sound, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Don't worry. I didn't plan to do anything to her today. Dumpling was skeptical. Who knows how much of what you say is true and how much of it is false? And, you even locked up Grandpa Clan Leader? Her little face was full of anger, as if she had not recovered from the shock caused by this matter. Yu Qian was not surprised by Dumpling's reaction. She was the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Seeing Yi Zhao in trouble, it was naturally difficult for her to accept. It's a long story. Yi Zhao made a mistake first. Locking him in the lightning pool was just to wake him up. Unfortunately, he was still stubborn and even did such a thing in the end. Yu Qian's usually gentle expression now had a hint of coldness added to it, causing people to shudder. I'm sure you've seen what he's done. Yi Gong's body and soul were destroyed, and the entire lightning pool was almost destroyed by him. It can only be said that he reaped what he had sown. Dumpling bit her lips and clenched her two little fists tightly. Great Elder betrayed the clan first. Grandpa Clan Leader wants to kill him, so it is reasonable. This is our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's matter. When is it up to you outsiders to judge? She glared at Yu Qian. Release Grandpa Patriarch right now. Yu Qian was not angry. Instead he laughed. If you want to save him, it's very simple. In the future, as long as you stay here and cultivate properly, I guarantee that his life will not be in danger. When you open your 9th meridian, I will release him. Dumpling was shocked. Chu Luiyue also frowned subconsciously. 9th meridian? In the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, only their ancestor Yi Ling had managed to do so. Yu Qian actually had such high expectations for Dumpling? Furthermore, what was his purpose for doing this? To be honest, even Yi Zhao might not urge Dumpling to open her meridians, nor would he place this heavy burden on her shoulders. However, Yu Qian, what was he so anxious about? How long do we have to wait? I think you are just trying to fool me. Dumpling gritted her teeth. How am I fooling you? Don't forget, you have the purest bloodline. Now that you have successfully opened your 7th meridian before reaching adulthood, you will definitely be able to open your 9th meridian in the future. There is no doubt about this. As for the time, that will depend on you. Yu Qian looked around. There is no place more suitable for you to cultivate than Fengming Mountain. With your current aptitude, why do you have to worry about not being able to open your meridians? Dumpling stared at him and did not say anything. She turned around and pounced on Chu Luiyue, hugging her thigh tightly. This person is so annoying. Chu Luiyue picked her up and looked at Yu Qian with a frown. Second Divine Envoy, since you have already made up your mind, I know that no one can persuade you. Since that is the case, I hope you can keep your promise. On the day that Dumpling opens her 9th meridian, you must release clan leader Yi Zhao. Yu Qian nodded, of course. As soon as he finished speaking, Nanjin Shu stood quietly and patiently waited for a response. After a while, a low voice finally came from inside. Come in. Creak. The door opened. Nanjin Shu took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement surging from the bottom of his heart. He bowed respectfully before stepping forward. After he crossed the threshold, the door closed again. Nanjin Shu's figure disappeared behind the door. Jun Jiuqing, who was not far away, stared at the door thoughtfully for a long time. The 3rd zither score. No wonder he was so confident. He thought for a while and turned to leave. At this moment, Nanjin Shu walked into the courtyard. The courtyard was filled with a thick pile of fallen leaves. It was lonely, bleak, and extremely cold. If the sound did not come from here, Nanjin Shu would have suspected that there was no one here. The courtyard was not big and the furnishings were very simple. It was hard to imagine that the Honorable First Divine Envoy lived in such a place. Nanjin Shu looked at the tightly shut door and his heart started to beat faster. After all, he was going to meet the First Divine Envoy. It was impossible for him not to be nervous. He adjusted his collar and made sure that there was nothing wrong with his appearance before he continued walking. However, he had just taken a step when he heard a rustling sound from the side. He was stunned and turned around instinctively. Something seemed to be moving under the thick pile of fallen leaves not far away. Quiet. The low and indifferent voice sounded again. However, it was obviously directed at the existence under the fallen leaves. As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings fell silent again. Nanjin Shu was confused. What was that thing under there? I don't remember hearing about the First Divine Envoy keeping anything by his side. Nanjin Shu. Nanjin Shu's heart skipped a beat when he heard the First Divine Envoy call his name. Yes. Where is the 3rd zither score now? The voice asked straightforwardly. Nanjin Shu was stunned for a moment. First Divine Envoy, I think it's more convenient for me to talk inside, right? This matter was so confidential. It was weird to talk about it through the door. There's no one else here. Just say it. The voice was calm, but there was no room for refusal. Chapter 2303. After a moment of hesitation, Nanjinshu cupped his fists and bowed. First divine envoy, as far as I know, the third piece of music score is still in the god-slaying mound. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire courtyard became even quieter. Nanjinshu only felt an invisible pressure on his shoulders. It was unbearably heavy. He held his breath as nervousness gradually grew in his heart. The music score was split into 3 pieces and scattered all over the world of God. Only one piece was left in the god-slaying mound and was taken away by someone else. Now you're saying that the third piece is still in the god-slaying mound? There was a questioning tone in the deep voice. Nanjinshu hurriedly said, First divine envoy, I wouldn't dare lie. The last piece is still in the god-slaying mound. Even that person doesn't know about it. I only learned about it recently when I learned that the heavenly gate had opened and Taizu's brocade pouch was opened. Before Taizu of the Nan family passed away, he left behind a brocade pouch for the family heads to keep. His last words were that it could only be opened when the heavenly gate of the illusory god palace opened. The family heads of the Nan family, including Nanjinshu, didn't know about it before. Otherwise, Nan Yifan would have taken action long ago. If you know about it, then Jun Jiuqing should know about it too. Why didn't he report it? Nanjinshu looked troubled. I don't know about that. How would he know what Jun Jiuqing was thinking? Maybe he was waiting for the right time. After all, only the family heads of the Nan family and family E knew about it. From a certain perspective, this was indeed an asset that could be used in negotiations. After a while, the voice said, I already know about it. I already know about this matter. I will send people to search for him later. What do you want? Of course, he knew what Nanjinshu was trying to achieve by coming here. Nanjinshu's throat was dry from nervousness, but he was also excited and expectant. He paused for a moment, then said respectfully, First divine envoy, I would like to, please allow me to cultivate in the illusory god ocean. After the voice fell, the room fell silent. After a while, the voice continued to ask, Are you sure? Yes. Nanjinshu said carefully. Jinshu knows that her talent is insufficient. Based on her current standard, it is extremely difficult for her to ascend to the heavens and become a god. Therefore, he invited himself to enter the illusionary god ocean to cultivate and improve his cultivation base. This way the Taizu name would not be tarnished in the future. A moment later, a stream of light flew out of the house. Nanjinshu hurriedly caught it with both hands. It was a translucent talisman seal with the word, illusion, drawn on it. There were several mysterious patterns around it that were intertwined. This talisman can only be used once. When you come out of the illusionary god sea, this talisman will automatically be destroyed and can only be used by one person. You may take it. Nanjinshu was so excited that his hands were trembling slightly. He quickly thanked him. Thank you, First Oracle. You may leave. Yes. Nanjinshu didn't dare to disturb him. He carefully put away the talisman and left respectfully. After he left, the inside and outside of the courtyard became quiet again. Nanjinshu walked out happily with the seal in his hand. With this thing he could enter the illusionary god sea to cultivate. It wouldn't take long for his strength to skyrocket. At that thought, Nanjinshu couldn't hide the joy in his eyes. Patriarch Nan? A young woman's gentle voice rang out. Nanjinshu stopped in his tracks and turned to look. He saw a graceful figure walking toward him from the corner. She was gentle and beautiful, with long hair that reached her ankles. You are? Nanjinshu was a little stunned. I'm Su Li. The woman in front of him smiled faintly. Nanjinshu was stunned for a moment. Then, a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. Mr. Su. He had never seen Su Li before. The Nan family had suffered a great loss after the battle at Peach Blossom Dock. He had been recuperating in the Nan family. Although he had heard about Tang Ku and Mr. Su, Nanjinshu had never had the chance to meet them. After coming to the illusionary god palace, he had vaguely heard that Su Li was here. However, it was only today that he saw her with his own eyes. Nanjinshu paused for a moment and bowed. Oh, it's Mr. Su. My apologies. He had a special status in the illusionary god palace. His status was even higher than that of Chu Luiwei and the others. However, Su Li was an artifact sage. Naturally, she was different. Therefore, Nanjing Shu was rather polite to Su Li. Su Li glanced at him and asked with a smile, "What are you talking about? Patriarch Nan, what good news did you have? Why are you so happy?" Actually, she had just happened to pass by. She already knew that Nanjing Shu was in the illusionary god palace. She wanted to leave immediately, but Nanjing Shu's expression was a little strange. She looked up slightly and glanced behind Nanjing Shu. "Patriarch Nan, did you come from the first divine envoy's side?" Nanjing Shu didn't try to avoid the topic. He chuckled and nodded his head elegantly. "That's right. I just met the first divine envoy." Su Li's beautiful eyes widened. She looked shocked. "Really? Hasn't the first divine envoy been in seclusion for many years?" She heard that the other divine envoys had tried to meet the first divine envoy several times, but they were all rejected at the door. But why did Nanjing Shu? Nanjing Shu was rather pleased with Su Li's reaction. Su Li, Mr. Su, was a powerful figure. He used to be high and mighty in the world of divine ruins. However, things were different now. So what if he was powerful? Su Li had to bow politely to the other divine envoys, but he could meet the first divine envoy directly. There was a huge difference between them. The feeling of being superior made Nanjing Shu very happy. "Mr. Su, the first divine envoy asked me to do some things. I won't stay any longer." Su Li was puzzled. What kind of things could the first divine envoy ask Nanjing Shu to do? In terms of status, the divine envoys in the illusionary god palace were at his disposal. In terms of strength, Nanjing Shu wasn't too outstanding. Why did the first divine envoy choose him? Moreover, Nanjing Shu's treatment was different from theirs from the start. He was directly sent to the illusionary god palace. Countless questions flashed through Su Li's mind, but she didn't show it on her face. She only smiled. "Since it's the first divine envoy's order, I naturally can't delay it. Patriarch Nan, please." Nanjing Shu nodded and turned to leave. Su Li was taken aback. "Patriarch Nan, that's the direction out of the illusionary god palace." Nanjing Shu stopped in his tracks and turned back with a smile. "I'm going out of the illusionary god palace. To be honest, I'm going to the illusionary god ocean." There were very few people in the illusionary god palace who were qualified to do so. Nanjing Shu was pleased with himself, so he just said it directly. There was nothing to hide anyway. Everyone would know when he returned from the illusionary god ocean. Su Li frowned. The illusionary god ocean. Chapter 2304. Illusionary God Ocean? Chu Luiyue looked up in surprise. Nanjing Shu said it himself? Su Li nodded. "That's right. He looks very happy. The excitement and pride on his face are not concealed at all. This place. I've never heard of it before." Chu Luiyue thought for a while and a guess appeared in his mind. Could it be the ocean outside the heavenly gate? That's right. I followed him out of the illusionary god palace and saw him go straight to the heavenly gate. Other than that, where else can there be an ocean in the illusionary god palace? Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched and he immediately stood up. Su Li was shocked. "Little you, what's wrong?" Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and paced around the room. He felt a little puzzled. "Nothing, I just feel that this matter is a little strange. The illusionary god ocean is very dangerous. We saw it with our own eyes when we came here. Nanjing Shu is just a supreme god. How could he have the guts to go there?" Su Li heard and said. "He said that the first divine envoy told him something, but I also feel that it's a little strange. No one has seen the first divine envoy all these years. I heard that even the 8th and 7th divine envoys were rejected. What was it that he had to do? And I saw that he was very happy. It didn't look like he was taking a risk, but more like he was going to receive a reward. In any case, it must be a good thing for him." "First divine envoy," Chu Luiyue muttered. The divine envoys of the illusionary god palace were all very respected. The first divine envoy was the most respected. It could be seen from the other divine envoy's respectful attitude towards him. But the first divine envoy didn't come out when the lightning pool caused such a big commotion. Now he suddenly sent Nanjing Shu to the illusionary god ocean. It's really strange. Chu Luiyue said and looked at Su Li. "He's already out of the heavenly gate?" Su Li nodded. When she heard Nanjing Shu's words, she also felt that something was wrong and simply followed him out of the illusionary god palace. She was worried that Nanjing Shu would be suspicious, so she didn't follow her. After walking for a while, she turned back to Chu Luiyue. However, she was certain that Nanjing Shu had indeed gone to the Elysium. Looking at the time, he must have already left. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment, then said, "I'll go out and take a look too." What? Su Li widened her beautiful eyes in surprise. How can that be? Leaving the heavenly gates was already difficult enough, let alone going to the illusionary god sea? Little you don't have the slightest bit of understanding towards the illusory god sea. Isn't it too risky for you to go there directly? Su Li disagreed. Chu Luiyue had already made up his mind. This is a rare opportunity. Su Li's lips moved. Looking at her determined expression, it was obvious that she could not be persuaded. What's in the illusionary god sea that's worthy of you acting like this? Chu Luiyue paused. It's very likely that Senior Diwu is trapped there. Su Li was shocked. Upon hearing this, she finally understood why Chu Luiyue insisted on going no matter what. But, don't worry, Mr. Su. I plan to go there openly and investigate first. It won't be too late to take action after I've figured out the situation. After all, the illusionary god sea was just outside the Elysium. There would not be any danger if they just went to take a look at the Silver Bridge. Although Chu Luiyue also wanted to bring Diwu Zhangzi back immediately, she would not do anything that she was not confident of. If she took the risk now, not only would she not be able to save him, but she might even lose her life. She was very clear about this. Su Li was finally relieved. I'll go with you. Chu Luiyue shook her head. No need. I'll go with Hongyu. The fewer people involved in this matter, the better. Su Li could only agree. Be careful. Mu Hongyu was cultivating in her room. Ever since she retrieved the Mahayana cultivation method from the precious treasure pavilion, she hadn't left her room. Hongyu. Upon hearing Chu Luiyue's voice, Mu Hongyu snapped out of her daze and got up to open the door. Luyu, what's the matter? Chu Luiyue raised her chin. Follow me out of the Elysium and to the illusionary god sea. Mu Hongyu was stunned. Now. Chu Luiyue briefly explained the matter. It's a rare opportunity. Maybe we can gain something. Mu Hongyu hurriedly said, then let's not wait. Let's go quickly. After taking 2 steps, she suddenly stopped. Wait, Luyu, how are we going to get out now? Wasn't the Elysium heavily guarded? Chu Luiyue waved her hand carelessly. When we reach the Elysium, let Jinyun Lai open the door. Mu Hongyu, she glanced at Chu Luiyue faintly. Luyu, how can you be sure that he'll agree? Previously, he could say that he had gone to the weapon refining saint. What about this time? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. I have my ways. The two of them walked straight and arrived at the Elysium. However, when they arrived, they were surprised to find that many people had already gathered here. It was very lively. Did Nan Jinshu really leave here and go to the illusionary god ocean? I saw it with my own eyes. How can it be fake? Is he crazy? The illusionary god ocean is very dangerous. Isn't it too bold to use it to improve his cultivation? Isn't he afraid of dying there? Sure, they're different from us. Think about it. He entered the illusionary god palace as soon as he arrived. Of course he's different from us. It's still very dangerous, isn't it? Even venerables can only stay in the illusionary god ocean for a few hours at most. Besides, the illusionary god ocean has always been a place of punishment. Who knows how many skeletons are buried there? This is the first time I've seen someone who wants to cultivate there. Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu looked at each other. It turned out that the news had already spread. Luyu, what should we do? Mu Hongyu asked softly. Chu Luiyue paused. The heavens want to help me. I have to go. With that, she continued to walk forward. Soon, some people noticed their arrival and they all had different expressions on their faces. Chu Luiyue ignored them. She went straight to the Elysium and was about to step out. Everyone was shocked. The barrier bust. A heavy pressure stopped Chu Luiyue. Following this, a furious voice could be heard once again. Xuanhuan, what are you trying to do? Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at Jinyun Lai, who rushed over in an instant. Her eyes curved and she smiled brightly. 7th Messenger, you're here? Can you please open the door? She was quite fast. Jinyun Lai was originally there to denounce her, but when she heard this, she choked. Then a flame burned in her chest. What did you say? Just how much courage did she have to ask him to open the gate of heaven so naturally? Chu Luiyue's smile didn't change. I heard that Nan Jinshu went to the illusionary god ocean to improve his cultivation. I was curious. Look, everyone is here. If there's such a good thing, why don't you give us a chance and let everyone go together? Jinyun Lai's forehead twitched. Chapter 2305. He had just found out that Nanjinshu had met the first divine emissary and obtained a passage talisman to cultivate in the illusionary god ocean. How did the news spread throughout the illusionary god palace in the blink of an eye? It even attracted so many people. Jinyun Lai's mind raced. Nanjinshu must have been too arrogant and attracted too much attention. That's why, when he heard that Nanjinshu had met the first divine emissary, he was shocked and thought that Nanjinshu was quite capable. Who knew that he was a brainless person? How could such a thing be spread so casually? He suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a low voice, Nanjinshu went with the first divine emissary's permission. If you have the ability, I won't stop you. Chu Liwei blinked. Seventh divine emissary, that's why we want to go out and take a look. Speaking of which, I have a good relationship with family head Nan. I didn't expect him to be so powerful. Not only can he enter the illusionary god palace, but he can also meet the first divine emissary and go to the illusionary god ocean. If we can go out and take a look and see family head Nan's glory, we can learn something. What do you think? Jinyun Lai looked at her suspiciously. Just go out and take a look? Yes, didn't family head Nan go to the illusionary god ocean? We'll just take a look from the bridge. After all, it wasn't easy for us to come up here. We know how dangerous the illusionary god ocean is. Why would we gamble with our lives? Mu Hongyu immediately nodded. Yes, we're just going to take a look. Anyway, this is the illusionary god palace's territory. Are you worried that we'll do something out of line? Jinyun Lai's expression was cold. This group of people gathered here and even asked him to open the door. They were already out of line. What else did they want? Many people around them looked at each other. Actually, they were also very curious. It would be good if they could really go and take a look. Jinyun Lai said in a low voice. What kind of place is the illusionary god ocean? Is it somewhere you can go as you please? Even if they stood on the bridge and watched, it was absolutely not allowed. I'll let you go this time, but if you do it again, I won't let you off so easily. As he spoke, he looked around with undisguised warning in his eyes. Everyone's little thoughts were suppressed again. After Jinyun Lai finished speaking, she turned around to leave. Chu Liwei suddenly sighed softly. Sigh, since the seventh divine emissary is unwilling to let us pass, then we can only forget about it. Since I have nothing to do, let's take a walk around Fengming Mountain. Jinyun Lai stopped in her tracks. He turned around and stared at Chu Liwei. What are you trying to do? To find Dumpling. Chu Liue's lips curved slightly. Since I can't go to the Mirage God Sea, I can only find Dumpling to relieve my boredom. Recently, she has been making a fuss about going out to play a few rounds. If there's no other way, I should ask the second messenger if he can bring Dumpling out for a walk. You. She was clearly using Dumpling to threaten him. Now, the second messenger valued Dumpling a lot, and Dumpling was extremely dependent on Chu Liwei. She was still young and was at the age where she could make a fuss. In addition, she already knew that Yi Zhao was trapped in the lightning pool, so she was now full of hostility towards the Mirage God Palace. If Chu Liwei said something to Dumpling and caused Dumpling to explode, who knew what she would do? This Chu Liwei really knew how to push her luck. He had already made an exception to let her go the last time, but she still wanted to do it again. Chu Liwei looked at Mu Hongyu. Hongyu, you haven't seen Dumpling for a long time, right? I'll bring her out. 2 hours. Jinyun Lai coldly interrupted Chu Liwei. Chu Liwei sneered. Seventh messenger, what can you do in 2 hours? Are you afraid that I'll learn something from Nanjinshu? Jinyun Lai's face was cold. After a while she said, I'll give you 1 day. If you're not back by this time tomorrow? Chu Liwei immediately smiled. Deal? The Mirage God Sea is extremely dangerous. After leaving the Heavenly Gate, I won't care if you live or die. You will bear all the consequences yourselves. Chu Liwei nodded with a relaxed expression. Of course. Since she dared to go, she was prepared. Jinyun Lai coldly stared at her for a while before waving her sleeve. Buzz, the barrier opened. Chu Liwei stepped out without hesitation. Hongyu, follow me. Coming? Mu Hongyu's movements were very fast, and she almost caught up with him. The two figures quickly disappeared. Many people looked at each other. After a while, a young man tentatively stepped forward. Jinyun Lai didn't stop him. That person immediately felt relieved and lifted his foot to walk out. With someone taking the lead, the people behind him moved faster. Soon, more than 10 people left the Heavenly Gate. However, not everyone chose to do so. No matter what, the illusionary God Sea is extremely dangerous. What if I really die there if I go out like this? That's true. I think Nanjinshu must have a trump card if he dares to go. I'm afraid we can't compete. Forget it, forget it. The first messenger hasn't come out for many years. She didn't even meet the other messengers. Now that she's meeting Nanjinshu alone, isn't that enough to explain the problem? Anyway, I don't think I'm that capable. I won't join in the fun. Why don't we wait until this time tomorrow and see what Xuanhuan and the others have to say? Some people left the heavenly gate while others chose to stay. Jin Yunlai snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves and left. She wanted to see how capable Chu Luiyue was. As soon as Jin Yunlai returned to the Mirage God Palace, she went straight in a certain direction. She didn't walk far before she bumped into Xu Jing. Needless to say, she came from the sixth messenger again. Jin Yunlai had been looking for an opportunity to ask her how the sixth messenger was doing. However, now that she saw her, she couldn't be bothered to ask. Xu Jing was also in a hurry. Her eyes were filled with shock. Seventh messenger, I just heard that Nanjinshu went to the Mirage God Sea after meeting the first messenger? Jin Yunlai nodded. Her expression was cold. They've been there for a while. Moreover, the news has spread in the Mirage God Palace. Everyone knows. Shengguanyu even made a fuss about going out to take a look. Is she crazy? Xu Jing suddenly raised her voice. Seventh messenger, you didn't let her go, did you? She threatened me with dumpling. After much consideration, I let her go. Other than her, some people from the Mirage God Palace also followed her. Xu Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Luiyue was crazy, and the seventh messenger wasn't clear-headed either? Her reaction made Jin Yunlai frown. The news spread like wildfire in a short period of time. The more you don't let them go, the more curious they are. Why don't you just let them go for a day and let them see for themselves? The Mirage God Sea. Is it a place they can step into as they wish? Everyone had a deep-rooted bad habit. There were some principles that no one would listen to no matter how many times you repeated them. Only when they felt the pain themselves would they deeply understand and remember it. Chapter 2306. Xu Jing's expression softened. Jin Yunlai's words weren't without reason. For 10,000 years, the Mirage God Ocean had been under the control of the first divine envoy. It was heavily guarded and dangerous. The Yu Qian had inherited almost all the rights of the first divine envoy, except for this one. So until now, even the Yu Qian couldn't enter the Mirage God Ocean without the permission of the first divine envoy. Chu Luiyue and the others were indeed digging their own graves. Xu Jing thought of something else and frowned. What did Nanjinshu do? Why is the first divine envoy willing to see him? Also, this happened not long ago. How did everyone know about it? Jin Yunlai shook her head and continued walking. I don't know. So, I plan to ask the first divine envoy again. Xu Jing hurriedly said, I'll go too. When the two of them arrived, they saw two people walking out of the door. They were two young men who looked to be in their mid-20s. One was handsome and the other was delicate. Both of them had extraordinary temperaments. Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing were shocked when they saw them. Jiulong Xian Yu, these two were the 9th and 10th divine envoys. They were both cultivating in seclusion. Why did they suddenly come here? And it seemed like they had just met the first divine envoy. Jiulong and Xian looked over and greeted them. Greetings, 7th and 8th divine envoys. Jin Yunlai glanced at the two of them. Have you met the first divine envoy? The two of them nodded. The first divine envoy ordered us to go to the god-slaying tomb in the divine ruins world immediately. We are about to leave. The first divine envoy gave the order personally? Xu Jing couldn't believe it. One had to know that that person hadn't cared about the illusory god palace for many years. This was too sudden. Jin Yunlai suddenly realized something. Could it be because of Nanjinshu? Sure enough, Xian immediately explained, rumor has it that the third score is most likely there, so the first oracle sent the two of us to look for it together. Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing were both shocked. Then they finally understood. No wonder the first divine envoy suddenly made such a big move. It was because of this. Although there were many divine envoys in the illusory god palace, there were very few who had the time and energy to do so. These two were indeed the most suitable choices. Jiulong said, if there's nothing else, we'll be taking our leave. After all, this was a task that the first oracle had personally given them. They did not dare to slack off. Jin Yunlai nodded. The two of them quickly left. Looking at the backs of the two people, Xu Jing frowned. After thinking for a moment, she walked towards the door. However, he was stopped by a barrier as soon as he arrived. A low and indifferent voice came from inside. Just do what you have to do. Xu Jing and his assistant were both stunned. Does this mean that he doesn't want us to intervene? Xu Jing was unwilling to give up. First Oracle, this is a matter of great importance. Isn't it not enough to send only the two of them? After a moment, the voice came again. Xu Jing, if you don't want to look after the herb mountain anymore, you can go with them. Xu Jing's face suddenly turned pale and he took a few steps back. Xu Jing has offended you. Please forgive me, First Oracle. Jianghu also fell silent. The First Oracle's meaning was very clear. There was really no need to continue asking. He cupped his hands and left. Then we won't disturb you anymore. After saying that, he gave Xu Jing a look. Xu Jing walked a few steps and suddenly thought of something. He paused and asked hesitantly, First Oracle, the Sixth Oracle's divine body has been damaged. If you want to rebuild it, you need to use the golden tianlei in the lightning pool. But now that the lightning pool is sealed, do you think? Originally, everything was going smoothly. They were just waiting for the right time. Who knew that the lightning pool would suddenly riot and disrupt their plans? If they couldn't rebuild the divine body as soon as possible, wouldn't the pills that she had painstakingly refined go to waste? Now she didn't know when the lightning pool would be unsealed. Who knew how long they would have to wait? Therefore she could only try to ask the First Oracle for help. The courtyard quieted down, and a layer of coldness gradually surged out. Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat, and she suddenly felt uneasy. Then she heard the person inside say coldly, Then let him suffer. Even after walking for a long distance, Xu Jing's heart still did not calm down. She walked a little absent-mindedly, and her eyes were unfocused. It wasn't until Jianghu was about to go in another direction that she came back to her senses. She quickly walked a few steps and came in front of Jianghu. When did the Sixth Oracle offend the First Oracle? Jianghu frowned. How would I know? Xu Jing's lips were still a little pale. She couldn't help but mutter in a low voice, This can't be. The First Oracle has been in seclusion for many years, but the Sixth Oracle just came back not long ago. How could he offend the First Oracle? Moreover, the First Oracle is indifferent and rarely gets angry. But just now, when she mentioned the Sixth Divine Envoy, the First Divine Envoy's voice contained a rare hint of anger. Jianghu also heard it. This was different from the time when she wanted to rush in and annoy the First Oracle. The Sixth Oracle seemed to have made a big mistake. So much so that the First Oracle refused to help him rebuild his divine body. To him this was clearly a piece of cake. Xu Jing suddenly thought of something and her expression changed slightly. That's right, when the Sixth Oracle mentioned the First Oracle, he seemed to be very frightened. At that time she only thought that he was in awe and didn't think much of it. But now that she thought about it, Jianghu looked at her and said, If you really want to know, why don't you just ask the Sixth Oracle? At this moment, Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu walked out of the Divine Gate and arrived at the Silver Bridge again. Chu Luiyue looked around as she walked. Soon she saw a familiar figure. Nanjinshu. Mu Hongyu immediately followed her gaze. Where is he? Above the deep blue sea in the distance, there was a person flying through the air. It was Nanjinshu. He went deeper into the illusionary God Sea before stopping. Then he rushed directly into the illusionary God Sea. Chapter 2307. The onlookers on the Silver Bridge grew restless when they saw this. Nanjinshu actually went in just like that? Even Her Eminence can't stay in the Mirage God Ocean for too long. Where did he get his confidence from? The Mirage God Ocean contains an abundant amount of energy. It can greatly increase one's strength if one refines one's bones and blood, but it's also extremely dangerous. I wonder how long it'll take for Nanjinshu to come back up. Chu Luiyue's expression hardened. Waves surged in the distance and the aura was piercingly cold. Even though he was standing on the Silver Bridge, he could still clearly feel the terrifying power contained in the sea below. Even she didn't have much confidence that she would be able to return safely after going down. Nanjinshu, she held her breath and focused. While keeping an eye on Nanjinshu's situation, she also listened carefully to her surroundings. I wonder if Diwu Zhangzi can sense the changes outside. She glanced out of the corner of her eye and saw that Mu Hongyu seemed to have entered a meditative state. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and her expression was calm. She was looking at the Mirage God Ocean. The noise on the Silver Bridge gradually dissipated. As time passed, the crowd gradually quieted down. Many people were curious about the Mirage God Ocean and wanted to go down to take a look, but none of them had made up their minds to do so. After all, everyone only had one life. Moreover, the seventh divine emissary had made it very clear that once they left the Heaven Gate, they would die regardless of whether they lived or died. When the time came, they wouldn't even have anyone to call for help. Thus, everyone waited in tacit understanding. It wouldn't be too late to make a decision after Nanjinshu's situation cleared up. After a long while, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Chu Luiyue was a little disappointed and worried. I wonder how Diwu Zhangze is doing. Mu Hongyu, on the other hand, changed her position and looked in another direction. Chu Luiyue didn't disturb her. Suddenly the crowd became restless again. Chu Luiyue instinctively turned around and saw two young men walking out of the heavenly gate one after another. These were two completely unfamiliar faces, but Chu Luiyue could vaguely guess the other party's identity the moment she saw them. Judging from his noble aura, he was probably an oracle as well. Sure enough, some sharp-eyed people had already recognized the identities of these two people and hurriedly bowed. Greetings, 9th and 10th divine emissaries. Hearing this, the remaining people immediately bowed. Jiolong and Shiyen only nodded slightly. They didn't say anything and walked down. When he passed by Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. Jiolong suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Chu Luiyue. Are you Xuanhuan? Chu Luiyue looked up. The young man's face was filled with curiosity and inquiry. Chu Luiyue nodded. Exactly. Jiolong laughed. You're quite capable. This didn't sound like a compliment. Shiyen glanced over. Jiolong, let's go. The two of them had always had a good relationship, so the way they addressed each other was more casual. Jiolong retracted her gaze and followed Shiyen. The two of them arrived at the bottom of the silver bridge. Then, with a flash of their figures, they disappeared from the spot. Divine emissaries were all above the god realm, so crossing the illusion god sea wasn't a problem for them. But the question was, where were they going? The two oracles actually left the heaven gate. What are they doing? These two rarely show their faces in public. That's right. This is the first time I've seen them after so many years. I didn't expect them to be here. All sorts of discussions broke out. There were also a few people silently sizing up Chu Luiyue. What did the 9th divine emissary mean by that? Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. In truth, she had caused a lot of trouble in the illusion god palace recently, so it was normal for the oracles to be curious about her. What she wanted to know more was why these two had gone to the divine ruins world. For two oracles to be dispatched at the same time, it must be no small matter. After thinking for a while, she couldn't find any clues, so she temporarily suppressed this thought. Master Yu Jiao and Shiyen went out. I think it has something to do with Nanjinshu. In the room, Rong Xiao sat behind the table reading a book in his hand. Hearing Yin Qing's words, he replied with a and flipped a page of the book. Other than that, there was no other reaction. Yin Qing hesitated for a moment and asked, "Why don't I go and find out where they went?" Rong Xiao's thin lips curved. No need to ask. They went to the god-slaying mound. God-slaying mound? Yin Qing was shocked. Why are they going to the god-slaying mound at this time? For the last zither score, of course. Other than that, what else could make the illusion god palace do such a big thing? Yin Qing frowned. That zither score is also very important to madam. If they find it first, they won't find it. Rong Xiao laughed, put down the book and looked out the window. It will belong to whoever it belongs to. Yin Qing retreated from the room. He was a little worried at first, but judging from his master's reaction, it seemed that he didn't care too much about it. Wind element pill. 1 Platycladus orientalis, 3 Huai Mingzi, 1 golden sand vine. Little Hachi's lazy voice came. Yin Qing looked up and saw little Hachi and Jian Fengqi sitting face to face in the yard. Jian Fengqi was holding a book in his hand, and there was a pile of herbs on the stone table in front of him. Listening to little Hachi lazily reciting the prescription of the wind element pill, Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched. You really know everything on this list. Little Hachi chuckled and picked a jinling fruit. Her delicate hands were slender and delicate, as if they were carved out of jade. They seemed to be more crystal clear than the jinling fruit. She put the jinling fruit into her mouth and her voice was a little muffled. I told you before, I've already broken through to the Supreme Doctor level, but you didn't believe me. Tizke, this time he learned his lesson. Jian Fengqi suddenly felt a headache coming on. He closed the book in his hand and took a deep breath. There's no way I can survive. Ever since he was deeply hurt by Chu Luiyue, Jian Fengqi silently prepared to work hard, vowing to win back his pride. Thinking that little Hachi was also a celestial physician, he wanted to compare notes with her. However, little Hachi rejected him, and the reason was very simple: he was not qualified. With Jian Fengqi's temper, how could he stand this? He immediately asked for a test. However, little Hachi directly handed over a prescription. Although he hadn't broken through, he could see that the pills on the list were all at the Supreme Doctor level. Then, little Hachi really did recite it backwards. Young Master Jian, don't talk about Master, even if you compare yourself to me you're still a little brother. Jian Fengqi put down the book and stood up angrily. Little Hachi smiled and waved her hand generously. This book is for you, no need to thank me. Jian Fengqi turned around, picked up the book and left angrily. Chapter 2308. Tisk, it's been so many years. Haven't you suffered enough blows yet? Little Hachi smiled leisurely. Your courage is commendable. Jian Fengqi staggered and walked even faster. After a while, his figure disappeared outside the door. Well, it was obvious that he had gone to the herb mountain. Little Hachi was in a good mood after dealing a blow to the proud young Master Jian in all aspects. She glanced around and saw Yanqing. She smiled and said, "Oh, Lord Yanqing, where are you going?" Her greeting was just a casual greeting. Who would have thought that Yanqing would take a step forward and walk over to her? When he was 3 steps away from Little 8, he stopped and stood still. His figure was thin and tall. With Little 8 sitting on him and standing on him, he appeared even more oppressive. Jian Fengqi is 27 years old this year. If I remember correctly, he should be older than you, right? Little Hachi was stunned. She was still chewing on the Jinling fruit. When she came to her senses, her eyes curved and she burst out laughing. Lord Yanqing, I was just joking. You don't have to take it seriously. Yanqing pursed his lips slightly. Little Hachi blinked her beautiful eyes. She stood up and moved closer. The distance between the two of them was instantly shortened. Lord Yanqing. Little Hachi's cheeks were still puffed up. When she opened her mouth, a sweet fruity fragrance spread out. It was the taste of the Jinling fruit in her mouth. Yanqing's eyes landed on her moist and plump red lips for a moment. Then he quietly looked away. Little Hachi did not notice. She smiled and said, "You don't seem very happy." Yanqing's voice was cold. "I've always been like this. I'm not happy or unhappy." Little Hachi snorted in her heart. Everyone had 7 emotions and 6 desires. This Lord Yanqing seemed to be an exception. She turned around and smiled, the smoke swirling around her. If young Master Jian can be my younger brother, then Lord Yanqing can also be my elder brother. You see, your status is much higher than his. Yanqing frowned. Little Hachi tilted her head. Brother Yanqing? The originally light and sweet fragrance seemed to have suddenly become rich and thick, making people a little intoxicated. Her voice had always been soft and gentle, and he had long since gotten used to it. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt that something was different, as if his heart had been gently scratched by something. Yanqing turned around and left. Sigh. Seeing that there was no response from the other party, Little 8 pursed her lips and swallowed the fruit in her mouth. I can't call you little brother or big brother. You're really hard to please. Yanqing went straight back to her room. As soon as she entered the room, she immediately felt that something was wrong and looked up at the screen. Her cold gaze was as sharp as a knife, as if she was going to cut the screen. Come out. Sigh, it's not like you don't know it's me. Can't you be nicer? A figure slowly walked out from behind. It was Umo. Yanqing's expression did not change. If I didn't know it's you, you would have died here. A strange smile appeared on Umo's face as he said word by word, You're too fierce, brother Yanqing, big brother. As soon as he finished speaking, a strong wind attacked. Swish. Umo was shocked and immediately dodged. He patted his chest with lingering fear. Tsk, we were talking nicely. Why did you hit me? Yanqing's eyes were as cold as ice. If you want to die, I can send you on your way. Umo snorted. I haven't lived long enough. Forget it. How interesting it was to live. Yanqing was speechless because of a girl's words. If he died, he would not be able to see such a wonderful scene. No wonder you're Madam's subordinate. Little Hachi, you're really awesome. If you have something to say, just say it. If not, get lost. It was rare for Yanqing to say so many words to him, but it was not good. Umo silently held back a tear of sympathy for himself and then said, I'm here to talk to you about something serious. The first oracle sent Zhou Long and Shi Yan to the god-slaying tomb. You already know, right? Yanqing nodded. The news was sent by Nanjinshu. By right, Jun Jiuqing should know about it, but he didn't say anything. And after that he went into seclusion. I feel something is wrong. Yanqing frowned. What do you mean? Umo took a deep breath and said seriously, he went to the main hall of the palace of the illusory god. Time passed slowly. It was still calm above the sea. Nan Jinshu still hadn't come out. If it weren't for the fact that the surrounding energy kept flowing in Nan Jinshu's direction, everyone would have thought something had happened to him. After a while, Mu Hongyu finally came back to her senses and went to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue turned to look at her. Their eyes met. Mu Hongyu frowned and shook her head. She had already tested it. Under the illusory god ocean, the space was indeed distorted. But standing on the silver bridge, she couldn't check it out because of the water. She had tried a few methods, but none of them worked. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered. Then she made up her mind. I'll go down and take a look. Since she couldn't see the whole picture here, she might as well go down and check it out. Mu Hongyu was shocked and quickly pulled her wrist. No. It was too dangerous down there. Even she wasn't confident that she could avoid the distorted space. Not to mention Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue shook her head. This was a rare opportunity. If she could figure out the situation down there, it would be easier for Mu Hongyu to take action later. Hearing the conversation between the two of them, many people around them looked over in surprise. Xuanhuan wants to go down there? She's too bold. I heard that she crossed the sea very easily before. She even brought a few high gods with her. She must be quite confident, right? That's different from this. The illusory god ocean. She might not be able to come back up after going down. Besides, she doesn't have the first divine envoy's permission. Isn't she just digging her own grave? Let's just wait and see. If one had the first divine envoy's permission, they would have an extra layer of protection in the illusory god ocean. Wasn't Nan Jinshu the same? However, almost no one planned to go down like Chu Luiyue. A long time ago there were people who tried to sneak into the illusory god ocean. In the end, all of them died and their souls were destroyed. That was why everyone was so afraid. Even though they were already standing on the silver bridge, they didn't dare to go down. Upon hearing that, Mu Hongyu gritted her teeth. I'll go with you. She might be able to help her a little. Chu Luiyue shook her head. It's better for you to wait here. After all, she could better spy on the changes and movements in the illusory god ocean. I'll be back soon. With that, Chu Luiyue patted her hand gently. Then, she tiptoed and headed in Nan Jinshu's direction. Chapter 2309. Chu Luiyue was very fast. The blue-black sea was surging, mysterious and unfathomable. The sea breeze carried a hint of coolness as it brushed past her face, lifting her hair and skirt. Thick energies intertwined, forming an enormous pressure that even made the space above the sea as difficult to traverse. Chu Luiyue's body flickered with a dazzling light. Whoosh! She summoned the star darkness sword and gripped it tightly in her hand. A faint golden light flickered, appearing especially bright and eye-catching in this dark sky and sea. The further she went, the heavier the pressure. The smell of blood gradually spread in the air. It was very faint, but it could not be ignored. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. Suddenly, her footsteps paused as she stared ahead. A deep whirlpool had appeared on the surface of the sea not far away from her. The surrounding seawater flowed quietly without the slightest sound. If not for the fact that Chu Luiyue was standing very close, she probably would not have noticed it. Streams of incomparably vigorous power also surged downwards. A figure was faintly discernible. Chu Luiyue only needed a glance to recognize that person. It was Nan Jinshu. At this moment, there was a palm-sized seal floating quietly above his head. His entire body was suffused with a layer of faint red light, forming a natural barrier. Those fierce surges of energy collided with it and were silently swallowed without any sound. The power contained in that seal was powerful and noble, and clearly did not come from Nan Jinshu. That was the seal of the first divine emissary. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled as she moved closer, wanting to see it more clearly. She was very curious about this first divine emissary. After coming to the Illusion God Palace, she had seen several divine emissaries. But the most mysterious one was the first divine emissary. Even if she had not seen him, she could clearly feel that the first divine emissary's status was far higher than the other divine emissaries. Even the second divine emissary Yu Qian was the same. Moreover, he was in charge of the Illusion God Ocean. If she wanted to save Diwu Zhangze, she had to find a way to get past the first divine emissary. However, after walking forward for a short distance, she felt an invisible force stopping her from going any further. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. This aura, why does it seem so familiar? He couldn't describe the specific feeling, but there was indeed an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Chu Luiyue furrowed his brows and thought for a while, but to no avail. He could only put this idea aside for the time being. Nan Jinshu's aura kept growing stronger. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment before finally rushing into the illusionary god sea. In the lonely and quiet cage, Dugu Mabao suddenly opened his eyes and frowned. A moment later, a cloud of black fog condensed outside the cage. A hoarse and gloomy laugh came from inside. She actually went to the illusionary god sea. It can be seen that she really cares about Diwu. In order to save him, he didn't even hesitate to take such a risk. Diske, even if Diwu dies this time, he should be able to rest in peace, right? Even though he was smiling, his tone was filled with hatred as he gnashed his teeth. Diwu Zhangzi suddenly betrayed him back then. This debt had yet to be settled. Dugu Mabao's brows gradually relaxed, and he returned to his usual cold and indifferent appearance. Isn't it natural for her to go to the illusionary god sea? Including Herb Mountain, Lightning Pool, Phoenix Cry Mountain, and even the illusionary god palace. Where can she not go? Of course she can't go now. The person opposite him seemed to be infuriated, and his voice became shrill. Don't forget who is in charge of the illusionary god sea now. She's just digging her own grave by going there this time. Dugu Mabao suddenly laughed and mocked. You don't even dare to kill me, let alone her? The person in the black fog suddenly fell silent. After a long while. You're right. I won't take any of your lives now. However, if you think that I can't do anything to you, you're too naive. When Lan Shao reconstructed his divine body, he swallowed a total of 5 golden tianlei, right? Dugu Mabao's heart suddenly sank. Then he heard the voice say again. The 6th divine envoy needs to reconstruct his divine body now, but unfortunately the lightning pool has been sealed, so it's been delayed. Although I can't kill Lan Shao, it's easy for me to take the power of the tianlei in his body. What? Chu Luiyue rushed into the sea. In an instant, a bone-chilling coldness surrounded him from all directions. It was as if dense steel needles were stabbing him endlessly. It was as if they wanted to pierce through his flesh and bones. Chu Luiyue waved her hand lightly, and a beautiful transparent barrier surrounded her. With this barrier's protection, the bone-chilling coldness lessened significantly. She looked forward. She could see Nanjinshu's figure more clearly here. The vortex continued to suck in the surrounding energy, and in the end all of it poured into his head from the top of his head. He closed his eyes, clenched his fists, and frowned. He seemed to be in pain. The power of the seawater was enough to kill a high god on the spot. That was why even Her Eminence had to go through a lot of torture here. This was the result of him being protected by the seal. If Nanjinshu came here himself, he wouldn't be any better than those high gods. A thin ray of light suddenly appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. The sea water surged and the ray of light drifted over with the waves. Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a deep sense of unease. She turned around and went to the side. The thread-like light floated past her feet. An extremely thin black spatial crack appeared. Chu Luiyue's pupils contracted. Chapter 23:10. This was no ordinary stream of light. It was the squeezing force produced when different spaces intersected. Chu Luiyue held her breath, her temples throbbing. If she had not dodged in time she would have. She looked down and saw that stream of light quickly dissipate. However, in the depths of this sea, there were similar streams of light that were faintly discernible. Mu Hongyu had said before that under the illusory god sea, countless spatial forces intersected, and it was extremely dangerous. Now it seemed that she was right. If Diwu Zhangzi was really trapped down here, Chu Luiyue gritted her teeth. Diwu Zhangzi did not have a divine body, and did not have an advantage to begin with. If he went through so much torture, the mastermind purposely separated Diwu Zhangzi and Dugu Mabao, and locked him up here alone. What? At this moment she suddenly felt a chill on her back. Her heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, she immediately turned around and swung her sword. Piercingly cold sword chi flew out. There was the faint sound of something being cut apart. A slender stream of light was instantly cut into two. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly. Then she suddenly thought of something and looked at Nanjinshu again. He was firmly protected by that sigil. Those strange streams of light all avoided him and could not hurt him at all. No wonder. The first divine envoy sigil was indeed interesting. Chu Luiyue had a thought and dove down. The further down she went, the more streams of light there were. They were like seaweed, drifting freely on the bottom of the sea, but they carried fatal lethality. Gradually, when they brushed past Chu Luiyue, she would feel a slight pain. Her divine body was almost unable to withstand the spatial power here. Chu Luiyue knew this very well. However, she did not stop. She did not even slow down. She held her sword in her hand, and as if she was cutting through brambles, she cut and dispersed all of them. After an unknown period of time, a ball of light finally appeared in her sight. All of the streams of light flew out from this place. Some drifted into the distance, constantly tearing apart space, while some intertwined with each other, causing energy to scatter chaotically. She faintly felt a sense of uneasiness in her heart and finally stopped. Within that ball of light, a figure was faintly discernible. Chu Luiyue stared intently. Of course she wanted to go, but she knew very well that it was too dangerous. Just by standing there she was already out of breath. If she were to move forward. Suddenly, a strange fluctuation came from the interspatial ring on her finger. Chu Luiyue was stunned and subconsciously looked down. Suddenly a stone rolled out from within. It gently floated down. Chu Luiyue immediately stretched out his hand to grab it, but the rock easily dodged and then ran down at an even faster speed. Just as Chu Luiyue was filled with doubts, a stream of light flew over and was about to cut the stone. Chu Luiyue frowned. Although she didn't mean to bring these stones back after a long time, she still had some feelings for them. Especially since these stones had helped her a lot in the past and saved her from danger several times. Naturally, she couldn't bear to part with them. Just as she was about to make a move, a scene suddenly happened in front of her, causing her to pause. She saw that the stone suddenly emitted a warm orange light. That was the god domain inside. This god domain completely enveloped the stone. Then that silver thread-like stream of light flew over and automatically wrapped around the stone, merging into the god domain. Chu Luiyue was shocked and almost suspected that she had seen wrongly. She closed her eyes and looked again. The scene in front of her had not changed at all. The stone floated silently in the air, easily neutralizing the ferocious energy contained in the streak of light. At first glance it looked like a thin thread tied to the stone. Since the stone did not move, the thread could only float gently on the spot. Chu Luiyue blinked. Is this stabilizing that small space? Just as she was filled with shock, a second stone rolled out of the universe ring. Just like the previous one, this one ran to another location. After wrapping around a stream of light, it stayed there quietly. Chu Luiyue almost immediately felt that the chaotic and heavy pressure around her had lessened a little. Although it was very subtle, it was indeed there. Just as she was stunned, more and more stones ran out and spread out in all directions. At this moment, Mu Hongyu was standing on the silver bridge and waiting anxiously. She stared in the direction where Chu Luiyue had disappeared. Her hands were clasped together, and her heart was hanging high. Luiyue had already gone down for a while. Why was there no movement at all? Gradually, all kinds of discussions could be heard around her. It's been so long, but Xuanhuan still hasn't returned. Could something have happened to her? I don't think so. I heard that she has a few trump cards on her. Other things aside, she should have no problem staying alive. That's hard to say. It's risky to enter the Mirage God Ocean without the first divine envoy's permission. Mu Hongyu frowned. At this moment she was suddenly shocked. She looked at the sea in the distance, and a trace of disbelief flashed across her eyes. The countless intersecting spaces under the sea seemed to be gradually stabilizing. She took a few steps forward, not daring to breathe too loudly, afraid that she was mistaken. However, everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. The scene in her mind was gradually becoming clearer. Nanjing Shu soon noticed that something was wrong. That was because the energy flowing into his body was gradually decreasing. At a certain moment he finally opened his eyes and looked up. The vortex had shrunk a lot compared to before. Naturally, the energy contained in it could not be compared to before. How could this be? Nanjing Shu frowned. The energy in the Mirage God Ocean was endless. He was just taking a drop in the ocean to increase his cultivation base. Why was this not working? Soon he realized that the reason for this was that the energy around him seemed to have dispersed a lot compared to before. Many of them were moving toward the depths of the sea. He took the opportunity to look down. It was fine if he did not look, but when he did, he was immediately horrified. In the depths of the dark sea, balls of light were quietly flickering. They were very close to each other. At a glance, they looked like a pile of gorgeous lights. However, he soon realized that this was not the case. That was because those balls of light were emitting a unique pressure. He was familiar with this feeling. That's a god domain? Nanjing Shu muttered in disbelief. Then, a light suddenly flashed across his mind. Xuanhuan, isn't that her 3,000 god domains? She's here too, and she's even using her god domain to devour the energy in the Mirage God Ocean? Digression. An ink-stained February floated by. Fifth update around 7 a.m. Chapter 23:11. Chu Liwei crossed her arms and looked at the balls of gorgeous god territory floating in front of her. She rubbed her glabella as if she had a headache. It shouldn't have been like this. She just wanted to check out the situation first so that Mu Hongyu could rescue Diwu Xianxia after she broke through to the Mahayana realm. She didn't expect to cause such a big commotion. She wanted to try to stop them, but she soon realized it was useless. These stones were sometimes obedient and sometimes disobedient. If they really made a scene, she couldn't do anything about it. Then it became like this. The countless intersecting spaces under the illusionary god ocean were almost all frozen. There was no longer that oppressive aura around. In short, it was very stable. Unfortunately, there was a barrier at the bottom that trapped Diwu Xianxia. She tried to get closer, but she couldn't. It was also the only area that the 3,000 god territories hadn't touched yet. As for the other places around, Chu Liwei could even feel the slightest ripple in her surroundings. Xuanhuan? Nan Jinshu's voice came from above, sounding flustered and exasperated. Chu Liwei looked up and waved her hand. Patriarch Nan, what a coincidence. Nan Jinshu's breath was stuck in his chest. Coincidence? Who's so coincidental with you? Why are you here? Nan Jinshu came to Chu Liwei and questioned her coldly. Chu Liwei smiled. If Patriarch Nan can be here, why can't I? Nan Jinshu snorted. I came with the permission of the first divine envoy. Of course, I'm different from you. You barged in here and used your god territory to forcibly take away the power that originally belonged to me. Xuanhuan, you've gone too far. If they were in the divine ruins realm, Nan Jinshu wouldn't have the confidence and courage to speak to Chu Liwei like this. After all, the entire Nan family was almost destroyed by Chu Liwei. He was deeply afraid and traumatized by her. But this was the illusionary god ocean. How could someone like her, who didn't have a bloodline totem, be compared to him? Nan Jinshu's plan had been going well, and everything had been going smoothly. Of course, he was upset that someone had interrupted him halfway. Therefore he spoke very harshly. Chu Liwei raised her brows slightly, and her gaze quickly swept past the seal in his hands before she smiled lightly. Nan family head, I really didn't mean it. How could I have thought that, Nan family head? You actually couldn't even snatch a pile of stones. Nan Jinshu choked and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. How is this a pile of rocks? These were clearly deity domains. Furthermore, these divine territories were all under her control. How could she possibly escape responsibility? Chu Liwei turned around and waved at a rock not far away. Alright, time to go back. The rock retreated and the light around it became even more resplendent. It also involved the palace of the illusory god. How could he tell Chu Liwei? Chu Liwei smiled kindly. I'm just a little curious. Why won't you tell me? Nan Jinshu ignored her and was about to leave. Whoosh. A piercingly cold sword chi pierced over, brushing past the top of his head. Nan Jinshu's movements suddenly froze as a chill ran down his spine. At this moment, he clearly realized that it was extremely easy for Chu Liwei to kill him if she wanted to. Xuanhuan, don't you dare. Swoosh. A cold blade was pressed against his neck. Chu Liwei chuckled. Do you think I'd dare? Nan Jinshu's body tensed. He swallowed hard and sneered. It's good that you know. It's related to you anyway. Chu Liwei was stunned. Then she heard Nan Jinshu say word by word. You have the first 2 pieces of music scores. You're quite capable. Unfortunately, you won't get the last one no matter what. Chu Liwei was shocked. Nan Jinshu knew where the 3rd piece of music score was. Where is the 3rd one? She asked coldly. Before Nan Jinshu could speak, the seal in his hand suddenly shone brightly. You're tuning in to the Sworddance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.